Welcome, everybody, to the Sean O'Connell Show. Happy Tuesday! Happy to be with you. The show is brought to you today and every day by our friends down at Big Willie's, 1717 South Main, Utah's number one sports bar, number one pool hall. I didn't decide that. You decided that. And a perfect place for you to go watch, Minnesota Wild, Colorado Avalanche Game 2 tonight. That'll be a 6 p.m. puck drop. Maybe you get off work right on time, right at 5 o'clock. Go watch Cavs Pistons. Even if you wander in around 6:30 Mountain Time, Lakers OKC. Baseball on basically all day. Big screens all over the place, food specials, drink specials every single day. Tell them OC sent you down at Big Willie's at 1717 South Main. Fun show lined up for you today. Gordy Chiesa to talk about what's going on in the NBA playoffs. Brogan Houston, as the Mammoth have wrapped up their season. I promised you we would give you some Mammoth player sound from exit interviews yesterday. I didn't do that because I'm bad at my job, but we're going to give you some today. Also, Stormy Buonantony, she was rinkside for the Las Vegas Golden Knights Utah Mammoth ESPN broadcasts. We'll talk all things NHL, maybe a little college football with her because, of course, you see Stormy on the sidelines during football season as well. It's going to be a fun one. And I have probably over-indexed and spent more time than necessary talking about the NHL playoffs even without the Mammoths in them now. I can't help it. I think that the vision of the NHL, the vision of Smith Entertainment Group, I was the target demographic they were looking for. They wanted to bring hockey to the state of Utah to serve a fan base that has not enough pro sports in this market. A fan base that has clung desperately to the Utah Jazz, that has wrapped its arms around MLS soccer and Real Salt Lake, even if they are not soccer dyed-in-the-wool, brought up on soccer and hockey. I think that soccer was probably the best example of why hockey can work in Utah. I think that now hockey and soccer together are a great example why baseball is going to work in Utah when it shows up. I think that BYU and Utah are great enough examples of why an NFL team would work in Utah, but an NFL team would work anywhere. So, well, maybe not St. Louis. I guess they tried that a couple of times and it didn't exactly work out. And in any case, I think that I got sucked in to the NHL vortex in the way that everyone hoped that it would happen. I mean, and when I say everyone, I mean everyone on the business side of things. We think we can grab these people. And it's worked for a lot of you. And I love that we have that to talk about now. But the NBA is still, from a popularity standpoint, is still well above where the NHL is at. I think that I think the NBA is holding steady a little bit more. I think the NHL hopefully is growing and is on the rise and is climbing. And that's good for all of us. But when you watch these NBA playoffs and you see some of the dominant performances that are happening right now, it's still a treat to take in the NBA. It's easy for me, I don't know for you, it's easy for me to forget that, a lot of these guys are still in their early 20s, including some of the very best players on the planet. And you're getting to watch them kind of develop, grow past these milestones, do things that they've never done in their careers. Victor Wembanyama last night in his post-game comments after a loss, for most people, a surprise loss by the San Antonio Spurs in Game 1 of that series, Victor Wembanyama was pretty introspective. He talked about his energy management. He talked about how he was doing things on the offensive end of the floor that were not helping his team. I think that he's a special mind, and obviously he's a special build and body in the sport of basketball. And we're getting to see this product in high relief in HD as it becomes the final product. And I'm talking about just Victor Wembanyama's game in that case. The other fun thing that happened last night in the NBA playoffs was Ant-Man forcing his way back into the lineup despite the injury, saying he wanted to play, and Minnesota handling it well, having him come off the bench. He played 25 minutes. He scored 18 points. He was 2 of 3 from three-point range. It was a really, really clean game from Ant-Man. It's like the physical limitations of coming right back off an injury probably being a lot less than 100%, but also maybe something magical for him about, hey, we're also bringing you off the bench. So there's not a ton of pressure for you right now to be the guy that carries us. And for the second series in a row, or at least the first game of the second series in a row, the number one conversation that you have to have about the Minnesota Timberwolves is what they are defensively, the difficulties they cause for opposition with their lineup, with their gigantic and pretty mobile lineup. Rudy Gobert, he had 7 points. He was not exactly hyper efficient offensively, but that's not his role. Grabbed 10 rebounds as well. He only had 1 block shot, but he was instrumental in keeping Victor Wembanyama off his game. And obviously that's what, like, Rudy is getting some flowers because of what he did to Jokic in the first series. If he can continue this, and he's not going to outplay Victor Wembanyama. I think it's important to be clear about that. He's not going to be the better player over the course of this series than Victor Wembanyama is. But if he plays a significant role in just throwing Victor Wembanyama off his pace, then the Wolves could actually win the series. Wemby he had a triple-double last night. Not all triple-doubles are created equal, obviously. He had a triple-double, 15 rebounds, only 11 points. He missed all 8 of his three-point attempts, which is a record for the Spurs on the wrong end of things. They've never had somebody miss 8 3-pointers in a playoff game. It's never happened in Spurs history. He scored 11 points. He also had 12 bleeping blocks in this game.
Yeah, did you see, OC, that was a record for the number of blocks for a triple-double in the playoffs. That's more than Hakeem Olajuwon, who is the all-time leader in NBA history in blocks. That's more than and you know, a guy who got way more triple-doubles than he got credit for a guy his size. That's more than he had in a playoff game with a triple-double, and I blanking on the other guy, but it was 2 other guys with that kind of a stat line, and Victor Wembanyama is the one with the most blocks. Didn't shoot it well at all, as you said, but did everything else well, particularly on the defensive end. The other funny thing about that is Karl Anthony Towns in that clinching game over the Hawks for the Knicks where they won by like 80 points or whatever, he had a triple-double only shooting 4 shots. So we've had 2 of the most unique triple-doubles in playoff history over the last week in this year's playoffs.
So Ant-Man and the Wolves surprised the San Antonio Spurs. They steal game 1, and Julius Randle, 21 points. He played the most minutes. He played 41 minutes in a playoff game. He ended up being the leader for that team, for his team. He led all scorers in this game. And Mike Conley was getting a lot of love from Ant-Man. The Minnesota Timberwolves are like the least sexy lineup without Ant-Man that you can find in the NBA of good teams, right? I shouldn't say that because the NBA has given us some, including our hometown Utah Jazz. They've given us some starting lineups.
You mean the G League teams masquerading as NBA teams? No, in the playoffs.
10 day. You got a 10-day contract, and also you're a starter. Like, we've seen that from the Tankathon teams.
But among playoff teams, I think you're absolutely right.
If you're just like, hey, we're going to roll out Julius Randle,
who the Knicks got tired of.
They're just like, cool. Cool. Rudy Gobert going to give you 7 points, baby. You're just like, that's not. But Ant-Man coming off the bench, and remember, he was not going to be available at least until Game 3 in this series.
Incredibly fast recovery for him to be able to play. He's still healing, obviously. He's playing hurt on that hyperextended knee, and he's got the other knee that's compromised a little bit too. But the fact that he was able to play it all and play as well as he did, that's incredible recovery by him.
The Lakers are dealing with similar things with Luka Doncic right now. Luka, though, according to Reggie Miller this morning, Luka is not playing in team scrimmages. He's not going in actual 5-on-5 runs in practice yet. So I don't think we're going to get a surprise appearance by Luka at all. Okay. I don't mean to take an aside here. The Carolina Hurricanes are currently on my television in those horrifically awful sweaters. The home sweaters that they wear with the hurricane flags on a hockey stick.
Yeah, what are those hurricane flags? I have not been able to figure that out. Is that something?
It's a hurricane warning flag.
Okay. The Eye of the Storm puck thing, their actual logo is so good though. Why would they? I don't know.
It's hideous. Red flag, red square with a black square taking up the middle of the flag. It indicates a storm warning. If there's 2 of such flags, then it's a hurricane. It's maybe the worst logo in all of sports. Anyway, that's my non sequitur. I apologize for that.
That Wemby triple-double, the 12 blocks, there's also a single-game playoff record, not just a playoff record for blocks in a triple-double.
And I cannot tell you how the moral victory involved in making sure that a record-setting performance is just that and not a win. For the Minnesota Timberwolves to be like, oh, yeah, fine, have your unbelievable defensive day. Let this be a lesson to you, though. If you expend that much energy at the defensive end of the floor and it takes away from whatever abilities you have on the offensive end of the floor, we're going to find a way to win these games. Victor Wembanyama's post-game comments, he talked about he was wasting energy on offense. Well, he was using energy on defense. He wasn't wasting it because he was getting blocks and he was successful in doing what he's supposed to do on the defensive end. But if you got that Mortal Kombat power meter at the top of your screen and a bunch of that is being spent on successful defense and then unsuccessful or inefficient offense, even Victor Wembanyama, this unicorn alien, nobody else is built like him. He's young. He's crazy. Like, even he can't keep it up indefinitely from an effort standpoint, especially when his fellow countrymen and a guy that he's followed for a long time is there defensively trying to stop him. Like, the Minnesota Timberwolves are one of the very, very, very few teams out there who can at least approximate the length battle with Wemby and force him to try to get more of his offense done from the outside. That's massive for them. Now, because of Victor Wembanyama's greatness, I think you're going to see him make the necessary adjustments, and he's going to outplay Rudy Gobert in this series. But I'm telling you, for Minnesota to even knock him off the pace changes the dynamic in this series dramatically.
It absolutely does, and not just with Rudy, by the way. Minnesota, when they traded for Rudy, and they still had Karl Anthony Towns, who's a 7-footer too. They don't have him anymore. But even without Towns, when they traded for Rudy, they decided to make a bet that, hey, if we can be bigger than everyone else, and offensively, if we can use a guy like Towns, who's a great three-point shooter for the size that he is, both his weight and his height there, we can take the league by storm. And it's worked so far, even after they traded away Karl Anthony Towns, because Naz Reid, who's also basically a 7-footer, has emerged as one of the better offensive players coming off the bench, certainly, and a guy who could certainly start in this league. He's another guy that gives them a lot of length. It's not just Rudy. They can throw lots of big guys at Wemby, at the Spurs. I'm not sure, like you, I'm not sure it's going to be enough because Wemby's talent is that great if he can just be efficient on offense, and that's what he's learning how to do still. The defense is kind of a naturally dominating thing about him. He's learning to be efficient offensively.
Yeah, if he makes one of those 3-pointers, then
the game's over.
The game it makes up the margin.
Yeah.
What it does, though, when I see this, right, we talk about this potential for a Utah Jazz lineup to have Walker Kessler, Trey J, Jaren Jackson Jr., we still workshop, and Lowry as like these three towers in the middle. I think it helps you, at least it helps me, envision an opportunity, maybe not to beat OKC, maybe not to be a real problem for them in the near future, but okay, if you can collaborate size-wise and slow Wemby down, you're never going to stop him, but if you can slow Wemby down and you can force the other guys to beat you, you still got to get better perimeter defense-wise, defensively, period. This Jazz team's going to have to be a lot better and close that gap. But if you can approximate a little bit of what Minnesota is and has done in their front court, which, by the way, I don't want to be disrespectful to, like, Rudy Gobert is a multiple-time defensive player of the year. And for the Utah Jazz, I think Walker Kessler can be a real factor. And I hope that he is part of their plans the way that I envision him being part of their plans. And obviously, Jaren Jackson Jr. was brought in to be exactly that, the defensive presence. He doesn't have the same level of size and length that Rudy Gobert does. But if you can be the poor man's front court, maybe that gets you over the hump against some of the other problems you have in the Western Conference, like the Denver Nuggets, barring any wild changes there, like this San Antonio Spurs team even, potentially, but the also-rans. Maybe it makes you more of a threat against some of the teams that are relying on size inside offensively. I'm not sure. I don't know. But one of my problems with where we're at with the Utah Jazz right now has been awesome. I think we get to turn it on next year, and this team is going to be better. Better is still, I think, a long, 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 long way from being good enough, given what other teams have in the West right now. But styles make fights, man. And the matchups that we are seeing right now, the Timberwolves being the best example of this, you're just like, okay, you might not be built to destroy everybody in the league. You might not be built to take out everyone in the league. I don't think the Minnesota Timberwolves and what they're good at right now translates as well against even the Lakers, certainly not against OKC, but progress is something. And I know for them, because they've been oh so close, there's no moral victory in like, hey, like, we are the stoppers of the Nuggets. And maybe, just maybe, we are the stoppers of the Spurs. I know for them that will not be good enough. Where the Jazz are at in their journey, if you could be the stoppers of even one playoff team in the West in this next season, I'm going to be like, all right, there's a vision here. There's some good things. Now we got to get better three-point shooting, better perimeter play. And if that experiment that I think is being put on the floor next year gives you something like what we're seeing from Minnesota, I'm buying on it. I'm like, that's going to make me feel a lot better about where this franchise is at.
What's so hard to swallow about Minnesota's success the last 3 years? They've gone to back-to-back Western Conference Finals, by the way. I feel like that's like the quietest back-to-back Western Conference Finals run, especially for a franchise who'd only been to one in their existence before that, and it was 20 years before, but I digress. What's a little bit hard to swallow about this is this version of the Minnesota Timberwolves is basically the version of the Utah Jazz that they hoped to be before they blew it up. And they did it
with some of the same players.
They did it better. It's a better version of what the Jazz did with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert 4 or 5 years ago. The team that was the 1 seed and lost to the Clippers in tragic fashion, right? And the other thing that makes it hard to swallow about that is the T-Wolves have Jaden McDaniels, who is the guy the Jazz should have picked instead of Udoka Azubuike in the first round. That was the guy that was there for the Jazz to take, and they inexplicably took Udoka Azubuike, who probably should have been a second round pick if drafted at all in that draft. So they are, and Anthony Edwards is a little bit taller version and a better defender than Donovan Mitchell, but he's the swagger. Like, Don has that Anthony Edwards swagger. He has that scoring ability. Like, the Jazz could have been this version of the T-Wolves if they made one different decision, probably drafting Jaden McDaniels, and if the chemistry was better, obviously. This T-Wolves team, you can tell, loves playing for each other. And because they chose wisely on the kind of perimeter defenders and making a bet on Rudy Gobert, the grit that they have is what helps them advance as far as they've advanced. It's just, unfortunately, it's been a talent gap once they get to the Western Conference Finals.
And I think that they should get more credit than they are getting for that grit. And hopefully the conversation around Anthony Edwards, extra respect put on his name, because playoff basketball, you should be doing this, right? If you're a star player for a franchise, you should be playing at significantly, like, you should be playing in a time when the medical staff is just like, it might actually be in your best interest to, like, give it a couple more games. I want pushback from my star player on that. I think that the norm in the NBA and in Major League Baseball and in the NFL too much, I think the norm now with a lot of these professional athletes is to be like, what's that? Doc says I can't go? Okay, I can't go. And I don't want to disparage and paint too broad a brush, because I know there are guys out there, and everyone plays hurt at the end of a season. I'm not talking about hurt. Playing injured is something that a lot of people just refuse to do for obvious reasons. And it's okay if they don't, right? But if I'm an owner, if I'm a hardcore fan, when the Utah Jazz are in a position to be in a second-round playoff series, and it's just like, this is a grade 2 sprain on the ankle, I want somebody going, well, tape it up and let me bleep and play.
Did you watch much of the broadcast last night? Did you hear it was Jordan Cornette that was doing sidelines? He reported that Chris Finch was trying, because they're trying to do a minutes restriction with him here, obviously. And Chris Finch was trying to pull him out in the second quarter, and Ant said, "No, I'm good. You can trust me. I'm good." And he let him stay in the game a little bit longer in the second quarter.
Like,
good.
We've gotten away from that thing too much in sports. And, like, we're going to have Gordy Chiesa on in 7 minutes, right? And I guarantee you that Gordy from his era, that's the norm. That behavior was the norm. That behavior was what guys did. That's the reason that John and Carl, all personal problems aside, from a basketball player standpoint, it was just like, I'm going to be there. I'm going to show up. I'm going to play for my team. Not because they were genetic freaks who were constantly healthy, but because the expectation they put on themselves, that I think the franchise put on them, that the league culture itself put on players at that time, was just like, yeah, show up and earn your damn paycheck. And we've gotten away from that in all professional sports. You've got load management. You've got rest. And if you do that in the playoffs, you're going to lose fans. If that becomes the conversation when the games are this high stakes, then the 55-year-old father of 4 is going to be like, dude, I can't anymore with this. This 25-year-old guy, I need him to be out there. And people are going to migrate to sports like hockey. People are going to migrate to the combat sports. People are going to migrate to where on display constantly are these things that we value in athletes. Work ethic, toughness, all the things that your regular job doesn't demand of you. That's what you want to see in pro sports. And I'm probably overreacting here, but Anthony Edwards telling his own coach, his own team doctor, let me handle this, is no longer the norm and is something that I absolutely love, even if it's coming off the bench. And obviously he played incredibly well. So when he says, hey, you got to trust me, absolutely you do. Good for him. On the opposite end of this spectrum is where the Philadelphia 76ers were last night.
Whew. Speaking of another Knicks blowout, that's 3 straight games of 25-point or more deficits.
And suddenly everyone's just like, it's the Knicks coming out of the East.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm listening to the radio this morning as I'm driving in, and Reggie Miller and Dan Patrick are talking, and it's just a foregone conclusion suddenly that, all right, let's say it's going to be the Knicks out of the East. Is it OKC? Is it San Antonio? Can Minnesota actually get there? Can LeBron? They're having a conversation about if LeBron can drag this team through a bunch of time without Luka.
It's not happening against OKC.
I don't think it is either.
Sorry, national media Laker lovers. Sorry.
And unfortunately, the conversation with LeBron always goes back to, can he do something with these playoffs to leapfrog Michael Jordan? And then it got into the semantic, who's the best player, who's the greatest player. Stop.
Yeah, it bores me. Absolutely.
But the foregone conclusion suddenly being that it is the Knicks coming out of the East is because of these big blowout wins. It's also because when you watch the Philadelphia 76ers and they pull the starters to rest them at the end of a game because it's a blowout and it's a foregone conclusion, and they're yucking it up on the bench and they're joking with one another, it is the most horrendous look possible. Even if, like, by all means, don't let it ruin your night. You're a professional athlete. You know it's a 7-game series. You can bounce back. Understand that there's an arena full of fans. Understand that there's millions of people watching. Understand that there are folks that expect you to care a lot more than it looks like you care. And I'm not suggesting they don't actually care, because clearly they do. They're NBA players. But the self-awareness, or the lack of self-awareness, to think that when your team is getting blown out, this is not a regular season. This is not game number 76 on the schedule where we've all kind of gotten sick of it. It's not game number 15 where none of us are really invested emotionally yet. This is a playoff game. And Joel Embiid, Mr. Street Clothes, is laughing on the bench while his team gets blown out by 40 in the playoffs. What are you doing?
Well, it's a fundamental lack of understanding of the city you play in, too. Like, that is Philadelphia sports radio is probably killing them for that.
Someone's gonna throw a battery at him from the stands.
And, like, listen, there's a lot of people that don't like the Philly sports culture. They think it's too much, it's too intense, it's too obnoxious, whatever. Whatever your opinion of that is, when you are the star player or even a starter on one of those teams that has a decent chance at winning something notable, a championship, or making a really deep playoff run like these Sixers do, especially after they knock out everyone's favorite to win the East in the first round, you got to have enough respect for your fan base to give them what they expect, right? Like,
I don't even care if you're acting. I don't even care if you're sitting on the bench pretending to be mad. Just do the thing you're supposed to do, and at least pretend. At least go through the motions of being an elite competitor when you're in the bleeping playoffs.
Yeah, that's bad. That's a bad look no matter where they play, but I just think of the identity of Philly and the stereotype of Philly. It's like, I would be livid if I would be like, I don't want to root for these guys. They're not one of us.
How often did we see that from a Utah Jazz team this year who wasn't even trying to win, where the players in a loss are just like blah, 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 blah. Like, you didn't even see that from the Jazz. Yeah. A group of young guys that have zero expectations to be anything. This whole trust the process. We're going to do it our way. We're going to win. Oh, look, we got Embiid. He's healthy this year. Come on, we're real. And that's your behavior. Is I don't want to overreact to microcosm things. Like, a joke on the bench is fine, but in that scenario, it's well beneath the level of respect you have to show your fan base and the NBA at large. We'll talk more about the important things, not that. The important part of these NBA playoffs with Gordy Chiesa. He's going to join us next. We're rolling on a Tuesday. It's ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. We welcome in our NBA guru to talk some playoff basketball. Gordy Chiesa, welcome back to the show. How are you, sir?
Sean, I'm doing well. Thank you.
I just spent 15 minutes ranting about my admiration for Anthony Edwards forcing his way back into a game one lineup, coming off the bench, playing the way that he did, arguing with his own coach that he wants to stay. Don't worry about minutes restrictions. I'm good. What did you make of his performance in game one in a Timberwolves win?
Very much. The whole thing he mentioned before, is that he wanted to win badly. 11 points in the fourth quarter. He delivered. When they had to make baskets and plays, he was right there. Yeah, he's emotional. That's what makes him such a terrific player, where he wants to be out there with his teammates. He goes last night in 25 minutes. I'm sure next game he'll start, and that's good. So they used good caution as far as not starting him. They tried to hold him out much as they could, and now he's ready to play. And so he's passionate. And in the NBA playoffs, there's no tomorrow. That each game does matter, and so does each possession. And he wants to be out with his teammates. Also, from a team standpoint, it's uplifting that maybe he was doubtful he's going to play in the first two games in the series, but he was able to deliver, and now his teammates respect him even more.
Victor Wembanyama had an historic but kind of strange game last night. Dominant at the defensive end, really bad from three-point shooting last night. He talked post-game about how he needs to manage his energy better and not waste things on the offensive end. I'm curious how you evaluated his performance and more the why he was so bad offensively last night.
Well, first thing is that they're being more physical with him. And so Rudy Gobert and Naz Reid and all the guys that were trying to guard him, that they really got after him. And so he shot 5 for 17, and he struggled in the second half, to say the least. He only scored 2 points and a 2-point loss for his team. And add to that, part of it was just the whole thing where the Spurs are first game jitters as far as, even though the first round was really easy for them, and now each round gets even harder. And Rudy Gobert is sole purpose during the first two series against Nikola Jokic and against Wembanyama is to try to slow him down. And so there's much more physicality, and Wembanyama, it takes years, but also in the meantime, every possession you've got to be able to be mentally strong and physically. And so let's not forget, he's only 22 years old. His 12 blocks were phenomenal, absolutely. And that set the NBA record for most blocks in a postseason, beating out Hakeem Olajuwon, Mark Eaton, and Andrew Bynum. So 12 blocks was great. Offensively, from three-point range, he's got to be able to mix it up better. Last night, the two main players from the Spurs, Sean, from three-point range, Victor Wembanyama and also De'Aaron Fox, they go 0 for 12 from threes and a 2-point loss. And so next game, those guys will be ready to make shots and be more physical and velocity offensively.
In combat sports, there's an adage about how styles making fights, right? That sometimes the matchup is more important than your individual talent. How do what you're good at match up with what he's good at and vice versa? We saw that in the first round series with Minnesota and the Denver Nuggets. Does their style match up well with this San Antonio Spurs team in a way that maybe other teams in the West don't?
Yes, very much. And also add to that, as far as experience, the T-Wolves have lost in the conference finals back-to-back years. So in their world, they're trying to get to the conference final, which is really hard to do. To be in the Final Four 3 straight years in the NBA. And so their veterans are good. And the star player, Anthony Edwards, is a major talent, just showed last night what he's all about as far as about his teammates. And Julius Randle is a bully scorer. And so the matchups for the T-Wolves is very advantageous for them. Now, the flip side for the San Antonio Spurs, again, I'm not going to overreact. It was a 2-point loss. And Champagne's shot, I thought, was going to go down and win that game from the left at the buzzer. That rhythm three was wide open. But with that said, the reason why they lost was the physicality of the T-Wolves. And that's a huge factor as far as understanding how to mix up the three-point shots and how you finish mid-range game and also how you drive to the basket. And the T-Wolves do match up with them, and we'll see.
Gordy Chiesa is our guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking all things NBA playoffs. The Philadelphia 76ers went out with a whimper against the New York Knicks. Now, the Knicks are on a roll. They're blowing people out. And was last night more about the Knicks being dominant or about Philadelphia not being prepared?
Knicks being dominant. Yeah, Philadelphia coming up an emotional victory in Game 7, which is absolutely spectacular. However, they had low energy, but part of it is because the Knicks were so fast, and Jalen Brunson showed his brilliance as one of the best all-time Knickerbocker players with 35 points. He was brilliant, 27 points in the first half. So it was a combination of both, but it was more Knicks. Knicks set the record now in the postseason where they've now have won 3 straight postseason games by 25-plus points or more. That's a historical standard. It's never happened before where they're dominant. Joel Embiid, who played very well in the first series, last night's game, he had no offensive rebounds, no blocks, and no steals. He goes 3 for 11. So they can't win against Knickerbockers without Joel Embiid having a high-level game. And so the Knicks were ready to play. They blasted the 76ers, you mentioned before, by 39 points. I'm looking forward to now Game 2, Wednesday night in the Garden. So now you're the 76ers. You're going to sit in New York City for a day and a half on Midtown Manhattan, and wherever you go, people are saying to you about you being chumps, etc. I lived that life when the Jazz played the Bulls, the same scenario where collectively the players do rally. So I'm looking at really the playoffs start in my mind and Game 2 on Wednesday night.
I was listening to conversations this morning about the Lakers series and about the questions of whether a 41-year-old LeBron James can continue to do what he's been doing, especially because Luka is not even a full participant in practices yet. This Thunder team has been incredible. They're, of course, the defending champs. How do you handicap Thunder versus LA?
I like the Thunder in 6 games, but I like LeBron all the time. So here's the question philosophically. Do we all think that Lou Dort, Jalen Williams, and Kendrick Williams can slow down LeBron? And the answer is no. So eventually they're going to play Caruso at 6'6", trying to get under LeBron's body to try to slow him down. So LeBron has a great matchup in this series. And so the question is, again, can he will his team to win by making plays? I see the big matchup's going to be DeAndre Ayton has to outfight Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein. And then the question also philosophically is, can Marcus Smart have enough tenacity and enough range of defensively to try to attempt to slow down Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? And so it's really a fascinating matchup. I do think that Thunder are going to win because they're so deep as far as 1 through 10. But I like the Lakers battling. Let's put this all in context with LeBron James, who turns 42 on December 30th of this year. When LeBron last time played against the Thunder in 2012, which is now 14 years ago in the postseason, Bronny James was 7 years old. Jaron McCain of the Thunder was 8 years old. Chet Holmgren of the Thunder was 10 years old. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was 13 years old. That's how great LeBron is then and still now.
That's absolutely insane. Who's the second most important player in this Lakers lineup until they get Luka back?
Luke Kennard. Got to make shots, but he needs help, though. He needs a screen, and he needs spacing. So he's got to get himself going. Now, of course, the flip side is going to be they're going to not leave him. So a lot of times when you're a knockdown shooter, like Kyle Korver, former Jazz, Joe Ingles, especially in playoff games where schematically the defense is absolutely, there's no excuse. leaving a shooter wide open for a corner three. Here's the game plan. What's the problem you leaving him? And so the players defensively know that. But with that said, you've got to move him around, set screens. You, as a best way, as a great shooter to get free, is be a screener yourself. I just described Stephen Curry and a younger version of Klay Thompson with the Warriors. So Kennard's got to get himself going as far as moving around and not let the Thunder stationary guard him. So it's going to be fascinating. Can he do it? Will he do it? And can his teammates find him and catch rhythm? The playoffs, there's nothing like it, Sean. It's so intense, and it's a mental game. And within the game, there's another game going on. The previous possessions. Most shooters in playoff games have to shoot forward, not backwards. You miss one or two shots, you've got yourself down the floor. Get your feet ready to make the next shot because the stakes are so high.
The Pistons had a scare in round one. They start their series against the Cavaliers tonight, 5 o'clock on NBC. Is it smoother this time for the Pistons, or are the Cavaliers a team that can take them out?
Take them out, Cavaliers could, absolutely, yes, very much. Donovan Mitchell, former Jazz, tremendous player, in his 9-year career has never won a second-round series. So Donovan, 9 straight years in the playoffs, and we all know Donovan's game. 9 straight years, never gotten past the second round. So in his world, he's going to be in a strike mode, attack mode, to try to get himself going, but also his teammates going. The Pistons are a defensive-minded, physical team. Now, so are the Cavs. So this is going to be a half-court series, basically. So can James Harden and Donovan Mitchell, can they outplay Cade Cunningham and Ersan Thompson? That's the first thing philosophically. And Eric Mobley, a jumping jack, can he slow down Tobias Harris, who had a great matchup against the Celtics, and then Jaren Allen versus Jalen Duren, who's a tremendous young talent, and then Dennis Schroeder and all the other guys off the bench for the Cavaliers and the Pistons. So it's going to be a deep series. It's going to go, I think it's going to go very, very long. And I do like possibly the Cavs upsetting the first seed, the Detroit Pistons.
What's your list today, Gordy?
My list today is the power of coaching. And before I forget, is that, you know about the G League? People always talk about the G League, et cetera. It's not important. Well, I know I'm not objective because I worked for the NBA one time as a G League mentor as far as coaching. So with that said, was that there's 3 coaches in the final 8 in the NBA that were once head coaches in the G League. They're Mark Daigneault of the Thunder, Nick Nurse of the 76ers, and Chris Finch of the T-Wolves. So 3 of the 8 people who are in the final 8 in the NBA were G League coaches, as head coaches. And that just shows you the power of coaching. So my list today is the most career wins by a head coach in NBA playoff history. The most wins as a coach. His 7 quick attributes as far as master traits of elite coaches at any level. 1, listening. 2, communicating. 3, teaching. 4, organizing. 5, delegating. 6, inspiring. And 7, under pressure skills. So whether you're a coach in junior high or high school, college, or the big bad NBA or the NFL, most coaches have mastered, if not all, many of those traits. Here we go. 12th all-time playoff victories are tied. George Karl and Lenny Wilkins with 80 playoff wins. Number 11 all-time. K.C. Jones with 81. Number 10 all-time. He coaches the Pacers right now. Rick Carlisle with 86. Number 9 all-time. My former colleague and friend Jerry Sloan is 9th all-time coaching playoff victories with 98. 8th all-time. Brett Auerbach with 99. 7 all-time. Larry Brown with 100. 6 all-time. He might retire, maybe not. Golden State Warriors, Steve Kerr with 104 playoff victories. Number 5 all time. Eric Spoelstra of the Miami Heat with 110. Number 4, just recently retired, Doc Rivers, 4th all time with 114 victories. Number 3, San Antonio Spurs former head coach for 29 years, Greg Popovich with 170 victories. Number 2, still running the Miami Heat all those decades, Pat Riley is 2nd all time with 171, and the number 1 head coach in the NBA with the most ever postseason victories is Phil Jackson with 229 victories, which comes to 68% winning percentage of postseason games. And that just shows you that these people have longevity and one of the master trades. All right, OC. In the NFL, who has the most ever postseason victories of playoff games in the NFL?
Right now, it's Bill Belichick.
That is correct. That's right. Belichick with 31. 31. Andy Reeves is 2nd with 25.
So Andy Reid he's got a real good chance of passing up Belichick and being the guy. Right now in the NBA, there's no one really close to Phil Jackson. Who has the best chance to pass him?
Nobody.
Yeah.
No, really nobody. You have to coach such a long time. That's the first thing. And also that you have to have around you elite talent for decades. And so Phil Jackson, to his credit, but also coaching elite talent is very difficult also because of the personalities. And it just shows you that he's able to, with his own, cult himself, as far as get these guys to play as a unit, literally majority of the time. And it's hard to do. I mean, coaching is, I know I'm not objective because I'm a former coach for 36 years, but it's hard because you're dealing with a lot of interesting personalities and that everybody does want to win, but on their terms versus what's best for our group. And the last point I'm going to say about this is that how can a star player showcase his individual talent within the framework of a team? That's the mission statement of a coach, to allow that star player to do it. And the coaches I mentioned on this list, they mastered that trait of doing it.
Gordy, love catching up with you on all things NBA. We'll see you in studio on Thursday.
Thanks, Sean. Peace out.
That's Gordy Chiesa, our resident NBA guru. Got to take a quick one here. When we come back, it's way, way too early, right? Off-season lists and rankings don't mean much, but if you're a Utah football fan, be prepared to get a little bit bothered by the latest ESPN rankings. It's the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Time for the hot lunch here on the Sean O'Connell Show. If you're watching on the YouTube, I've got a little treat for you. Look at this Big Willie's burrito special today. Patrick and Michelle, owners, proprietors, brains, and beauty behind the operation, are here in studio with us. Hey, Patrick, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm better now.
I know, right? It's a good hot lunch.
Is that pozole that is being opened
Yes.
right next to me right now?
Freshly cooked yesterday.
Oh, my gosh. Happy Cinco de Mayo to you out there listening, to me here in the studio, and to anyone who is looking for a delicious Mexican food meal, 1717 South Main. You guys went all out here. I've got a burrito, a cup of pozole soup, some tortilla chips, and street tacos.
Street tacos. Carne asada street tacos. Everything's made in-house. Everything's fresh. Like I said, the pozole has been cooking for 24 hours. Succulent, tender pork. Hominy. I mean, what more can you ask for?
I could ask for about 20 minutes where nobody bothers me so I can actually eat all this stuff, but I'm not going to get that for a little while. So you still got playoff hockey going on, playoff basketball going on, regular season baseball going on. Unfortunately, our Mammoth are out, but Big Willie's still running all these games.
Yeah, that run with the Mammoth, the vibe at the bar was so insane. The place was packed, people were chanting. I mean, it was like you're at the game, so the vibe was super awesome. Like you said, unfortunately, their time has ended, but yeah, all the games are going to be on. We broadcast all of them. The sound will be on. Great vibes. There is a lot of Avalanche fans that have been coming in, so that's a bonus.
Yeah, they've got a great. I mean, I think they're going to win the cup this year. They look really good. I can't decide how I want to deal with the Las Vegas Golden Knights right now, because when you lose to somebody, it makes you look better if they end up, like, oh, it's not so bad if you lost to the eventual champions. But also, I think that's like the rivalry's developing. It's not like you can never root for BYU if you're a Utah fan, but I think it's going to get there. I don't know if we're there yet, so I can't decide if I want to like wish the Knights well, or if I'm like, screw those guys, they beat us.
You think they're going to be more of a rival than the Avalanche?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I get that.
They're closer. Like everyone in Salt Lake goes to Vegas all the time for something, right? Not true with Denver. Now, we are the much, much cooler mountain city. Like when people who have not been to either Denver or Salt Lake from around the country, the mental picture of Denver in their mind is actually Salt Lake City. They think it's like this cool place that is tucked up right against the mountains. And then they fly there and they're just like, the mountains are 2 hours away from here?
Not a half hour.
Yeah.
Here.
We're right here, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, for that reason, I think that Denver can be a rival. But I think Vegas, especially because your first playoff series was against them. You got some big wins. You got, I don't know, really, really chippy. So I'm hoping.
And it's hard to watch the games because every time they talk about a player, they're like, oh, so-and-so scored 3 overtime goals against the Mammoth. And you're just like, all right, switching this off.
I don't want to hear about it.
Let's go to baseball.
Shut up. Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe you can help me decide if I'm going to hate on them already, or I'm going to wait till next year to really hate on them.
I think we start the hate.
All right, let's go.
Let's do it.
That means that if you wear a Vegas Golden Knights sweater into Big Willie's, you'll still get great service. You still get great drinks and great food.
You have to sit in the corner.
You got to sit in the corner by yourself. And if you go to the pool hall, your opponent automatically gets one extra ball.
Yeah, we'll put them in the penalty box.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, it's Tuesday night. What do you have going on at Big Willie's tonight?
Tonight we have bingo. Jackpot's still at $2,000. It's free to play. Get there early because it does fill up pretty fast. People sit outside. It's a little chillier today, but the mic goes in all places. So we have a lot of tables and space for everybody to enjoy that. But yeah, it's up to $2K.
Let's go.
It's fun.
You had poker on Sunday. You got bingo. You got trivia. And, of course, all the games still going on. Big Willie's has something good for you all year long. Get there. And when you go, tell them OC sent you, and they'll give you an extra special smile at the bar.
And a high five.
Oh, wow.
And a good game, whichever you prefer.
Okay. I know what you mean by that. Anything special besides the great menu for Cinco de Mayo?
We have amazing tequilas. None of them are overly expensive. Even the expensive ones are cheap. So come down, enjoy some fancy tequilas for reasonable prices. And we have some Mexican beers on option too. Pacifico, Coronas, everything you need to make your Cinco de Mayo dreams come true.
Big Willie's is the perfect place to celebrate. And even if you didn't plan on celebrating, now I've given you some plans. Go down there, watch a little hockey, play a little bingo, maybe a little basketball on the other big screen, have some incredible food, and hang out with Patrick, Michelle, and the crew down there at Big Willie's. 1717 South Main, the hot lunch special, and a great night on deck for you at Big Willie's. All right, we're going to talk a little bit more hockey. Brogan Houston is going to join us. I promise we are going to get to that list with Utah's ranking in the early preseason, offseason, Big 12 standings. You are going to hate what ESPN thinks about your Utes right now. We'll get there on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Oh, happy Cinco de Mayo here on the Sean O'Connell Show. What a selection of grub from Big Willie's. James, once you get me set up here with Brogan Houston, you got to come in and grab this giant plate of food that Patrick and Michelle left behind for us. We've also got a taco party going on in the cantina out here at the radio station. So by the end of the day, we're going to be all tacoed out. Big thanks to Gordy Chiesa, who joined us. Big thanks to Patrick and Michelle from Big Willie's, who brought in the food for the hot lunch. And a preemptive big thanks to our next guest. Brogan Houston, Utah Mammoth Insider, stops by to talk about the end of this season, what's coming for this franchise, and, of course, the remaining teams in the NHL playoffs. Brogan Houston, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm a little hungry. I wish we would have done this in person today.
You know what? We'll save some for you. They brought so much down. We'll just walk on in, and you're invited.
Sounds good.
So we've got some more exit interviews. We'll hear from the big bosses and such today. But your overarching thoughts on the end of that series with the Las Vegas Golden Knights and the way this team should be processing their performance in the series.
Yeah. Well, we talked to every player on Sunday, and it kind of seemed like everybody had the right mindset of this kind of like, oh, yes, this was the goal that we had set out to accomplish, that we make the playoffs and see what happens from there. But combined with the right amount of regret of like, oh, wow, like there were just these couple of things that we could have done better to make it onto the next round. And so it's kind of that mix of like success and regret at the same time, which is, I think, exactly where you want to be. Because, Andre Tourney in his press conference after Game 6, he said, like, it has to hurt, right? Like, you don't learn from it unless it hurts. And it was clear during exit interviews that it hurts, but that also doesn't stop them from, believing that they were in the spot that they were supposed to be in and that they had set out to the goal that they had set out to accomplish at the beginning of the year.
I mean, I think that especially holding leads, and then the bright side is you held leads in those games, and then the downside, the more significant takeaway is probably that you blew those leads. Third period leads are supposed to be handled by pushing through and maintaining and winning the game. And what was, in your opinion, what was the biggest misstep or the issue or issues that caused this team to be so close and yet not being able to close those out?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of two things. One is that Vegas is the best third period team in the league this year. So that's part of it. Like, a lot of teams have given up third period leads to the Vegas Golden Knights this year. But, obviously the Mammoths did it 3 times that they were leading in the third period and lost the game. So there's something that, you have to adjust and fix. And I think the thing that the Mammoths struggled with in this series was they'd get a lead and then they would defend as if they're on the penalty kill. So what I mean by that is that, you get the puck and rather than skating it down and trying to hold it in the other team's zone and score another goal or what have you, they would get the puck and they'd just ice it, or they'd just, get to the red line and dump it in and change and let the next group come and defend. And that works for maybe a few plays in a row. Like, if you're just letting the other team have speed through the neutral zone, they're going to burn you every time. And they did burn them every time on those. And so, I just kind of think it was a lapse in system in this playoff series, as well as just, you're facing a really good team that can really do good things, especially in the third period.
Who was the Mammoth MVP this season? There was, Cooley was injured for an amount of time. Keller had he led the team in points, and obviously he overcame a lot personally. But who is the team MVP if you take the whole thing, playoffs, regular season, et cetera, into consideration?
That's a really good question. I'm kind of split between Dylan Guenther and Nick Schmaltz, and I'll give a case for each one.
Nice.
So Dylan Guenther obviously scored 40 goals this year. Not every team has a 40-goal scorer. Like, that's a lot of goals. He's also only, 23, 24 years old, right around there. So he's still got lots and lots left to learn and grow and get better. So, it's not unlikely that we see a 50 or 60 goal season from him eventually. And I think he has the capability to do that. And those 40 goals, a lot of them came in really big moments. And if you don't have Dylan Guenther, I don't think you make the playoffs this year. Now, my case for Nick Schmaltz is, like you mentioned, Logan Cooley goes down, and Barrett Hayton also was, out of the lineup at one point this season as well. those are the two top centers from last year. And all of a sudden, Utah kind of needed somebody to step up and fill the first line center role. And that's exactly what Nick Schmaltz did. Like in the NHL to this point, Nick Schmaltz had barely played center. He had always been a winger. And for those who might not know, center is a much more difficult position to play than wing. Like you have way more defensive responsibility. You're taking faceoffs. You're doing all these extra things. Plus, you're playing a 200-foot game rather than like you're playing from one end of the boards to the other end of the boards rather than just kind of your little section of the ice that the wingers play. So it's a bigger responsibility, and Nick Schmaltz knocked it out of the park. Like he looked like he was always a center, and he broke career highs. As a center, like he broke, all of his career highs in goals and points and stuff. And then just the fact that he was also on the ice defensively in every defensive situation. Like he kills penalties. He's on the ice when they are trying to defend a lead, all that kind of stuff. And so I think, like I said with Gunther, I don't think that you make the playoffs if Nick Schmaltz isn't in your lineup. And for that reason, I even put him on my Selke ballot this year, which is for the two-way forward of the year, because I just think he really deserves it. He's a threat at both ends of the ice.
I loved his season. I echo everything that you just said, and you would say it a lot better than I. But also, it felt like there were certain games, like he was timely with his best games in a lot of times, and whether that carried over to the playoffs, I guess, can be debated. But there was plenty of regular season matchups, especially as you're coming down the stretch in the final 20 games or so, and you gotta make sure that you're staying above certain teams or that you're chasing, the right spot in those standings and in the wild card. And it felt like he was really stepping up, and he would have a big game in those moments. Or if Keller was being quiet, or if Cooley was out, or if Gunther wasn't having a goal-scoring game, all of a sudden it'd be Schmaltz that kind of stepped into that role. And I think that's just such an important thing for a team to have, because you're always going to have your top-line stars, the guys that everyone in the arena is wearing their sweater, and those guys, Mammoth have those guys, and it's nice to see them. But Schmaltz felt like he was the glue and the bridge between when those guys were having great nights or were feeling all the way healthy and when they weren't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'd even extend it to the first line and the second line, and in this case, I'm referring to the first line as Schmaltz, Keller, and Krause, and the second line as Cooley, Gunther, and at this point, Yamamoto. That when the first line was not scoring, the second line was. And when the second line was not scoring, the first line was. And so they always had one line that was very productive, and for that reason, they were very rarely out of games. And then every now and then they'd have both lines scoring at the same time, and they'd put up 7 goals on an opponent and, not even have a chance of losing the game. And, obviously that's what you really want, is for both lines to be firing. But when you can have at least one of those doing, like scoring 2 or 3 goals a game, like that's a really good recipe for success.
It seemed like in the series against the Knights, the penalty kill got itself figured out and stepped up big in a lot of moments, and then the power play became a weakness, and you even gave up shorthanded goals. What happened to that particular special team? What happened to the power play in the playoff series against the Knights?
Yeah, I really think it was a case of really good game planning by Vegas's coaching staff. They recognized that, like I said, Dylan Gunther and Nick Schmaltz, they'll be the theme of this interview, I guess, that those two guys scored just about 50% of Utah's power play goals this year, just between the two of them. And so they made sure that they covered number 8 and number 11. And then everybody else was kind of just there. But because everybody's just looking for Schmaltz and Gunther, they had no option to pass to. And you saw every time, after the first couple of games when Gunther burned them a couple times with his one-timer, after that, they just kind of realized, like, oh, we cannot leave that guy open on the left wing circle there. And so every time that he'd go to take a shot, there was somebody there to block it. And I don't know how many one-timers he had blocked, but it was a bunch. And then Nick Schmaltz, same thing. He stands right in the slot, like maybe 4 or 5 feet in front of the goalie. And he stands there and kind of screens the goalie, kind of tries to tip pucks. He, will get passes in the slot and then just fire him straight in. And he did that all regular season long, and he hardly had a chance to do that during the playoffs. And I think that was just because, the Golden Knights recognized, okay, well, their power play operates through these two guys. So if we always have a man glued to each one of those guys, they're not going to be able to be as effective. And it worked. They scored one power play goal. I believe it was in the first or second game, one of those games. And after that, they just didn't score a single one. I believe they were 1 for 16 in the playoffs, maybe 1 for 15, something like that. But that's really not a good number. Like a good number is like 20 to 30% kind of thing, and they were at about 7%, something like that. So that's one of the things that you can point to and say, hey, if they had been a little bit better in this area, maybe they would have won the series.
Brogan Houston is our guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking Utah Mammoth post-mortem after their season. He is, of course, Mammoth Insider over there for the Deseret Sports. There were a lot of guys that the Mammoth kind of extended in these last two seasons to lock up their core in the relative long term. And it feels like all of those guys are happy to be here, excited to be here. Heading into this offseason, there's, questions about a couple of folks. And in the exit interviews, what I've been able to listen to so far, it seems like everybody wants to be here. And I know that, you express gratitude for the situation that you're in, but it seems like there's an authentic desire for these players to try to keep as much of this group together as they can and to be part of this growth moving forward for, in my opinion, obvious reasons, because they see like, all right, second year here in Utah, we made the playoffs this year. Next year we can maybe win a series or two. So with the guys whose futures are kind of hanging up or hanging in the air, who is the priority? What does this Utah Mammoth general management and ownership need to do to improve this team, but also to keep some consistency?
Yeah, well, I think the priority has already been accomplished, if I can answer it that way. Just that, Logan Cooley is on a new contract next summer or next season. So is Nick Schmaltz, and those two guys, like going into this season, it was no guarantee that they would sign long-term extensions, and they got them done already. And so in that sense, like, you will not lose Nick Schmaltz in the summer. You will not have an offer sheet given to Logan Cooley this summer. And so I think in that sense, yeah, they've already accomplished the big goal. So now the players that are remaining that they need to sign are, Ian Cole, Alexander Kerfoot, Barrett Hayton's a restricted free agent, so you've got a little bit more leverage there as a team. Vitek Vanacek, Nick DeSimone, these are all kind of depth players rather than your key, core players that are scoring every night for you. And so in that sense, like, they may or may not choose to bring back some of those guys or all of those guys. Like, they could let all of them walk and just kind of find replacement players in free agency that will do more or less the same thing that those guys do. Not to say that any of them are less important than, those players that they could replace them with, but just that, those are depth roles that a lot of guys can fill. And so we'll see what they do. I wouldn't be surprised to see any of those guys come back, but I don't think it's a dire need necessarily for them. Like, I don't think they'll fail in the offseason if they don't bring back Ian Cole or if they don't bring back Alexander Kerfoot. Like, if those guys are out, then somebody else would step into those spots and probably do a similar job.
You mentioned Vitek Vanacek, and he just wasn't very good in a backup goaltender role, and I think Vecchi, probably played maybe just a touch more than would be ideal in that situation. So is that a place that this team will potentially make a change, their second goaltender?
I would have to think so. But also, I was just looking at the market of unrestricted free agents in goaltending this year, and there's not a ton out there that you can go and get. And so maybe you do bring back Vanacek because he's probably honestly one of the best options on the free agency market. But like you said, it just didn't work out here for whatever reason. A backup goalie usually plays a lot more games than he did. And I don't think that like based on how he played, I don't think they felt they could rely on him in big games to get big wins for them. Lots of the games that they played him, like they were kind of these giveaway games of like, oh, we're not going to beat that team anyway, or oh, it's a back-to-back. Let's give him the team that we don't think we're going to beat, so that we can make sure that we get the game that we can win. And so I think in that regard, you don't necessarily want to bring back that specific player, but who out there is going to be a better option? And that's kind of the question that I have. Maybe it's a trade, maybe it's a free agent signing, but you've got to think that they would at least try to figure something out.
Is Bear Turney safe?
I think so. That might be a question that comes up at exit interviews today. We've got Turney as well as Bill and Chris Armstrong both. So we'll see if they say anything on that. But the report earlier in the season was that at one point the Mammoths were quite close to replacing Turney in the coaching position, and that Pete DeBoer was going to be the guy that came in. I don't know how close that got, but that was a report from Elliot Friedman, who is like the insider of all insiders in the hockey world. He never is wrong, basically. So I do believe that what he says is probably true. And at some point in this season, that was probably what was about to happen, and then the Mammoths kind of turned it around and obviously got to the playoffs. And so the battle in my head with this one is, okay, well, he's the coach that got you there. So you give him a little bit of runway, right? Like you say, oh, you got us here. Let's see how far into the playoffs now you can get us. The other half of that is all of his winning that he's ever done is in international tournaments, which are always, 10 games or less kind of thing. So he's never really had like a full playoff experience that he's won. Even in the junior leagues that he coached in before this, like he had a few playoff runs, but he never won any championships. And I think it was 14 years in the junior leagues, never won a championship. And so we'll see if he's the coach that can get you over the hump, or if he's just kind of this development coach that, helps you out through the rebuild and then you go and get somebody else. I believe he still has one more year on his contract, so maybe that factors into it as well. And I certainly wouldn't be surprised to see him back. I think he's done a great job. But, we'll have to see. Like, there's just so many factors that play into it.
As we head into an off season now, and the draft lottery is that tonight?
Yeah, tonight. Yeah.
So, by the way, Mammoth don't have draft lottery odds, but they do have some capital. They could potentially move up into a situation where they find a partner who works out well in the draft lottery, and they've got a nice little pipeline. We've talked about some of these players. The Aginlas and the Desnoyers and some of those individuals, Simashev and Boot were both given a little bit of a run with the big club this year. Any of those young guys you think become a staple on the Mammoth roster for next season?
I think the closest one is definitely Dmitry Simashev. He played maybe 30 games this year, roughly. Still played, obviously limited minutes and everything, but he played well in those games that he did play. Now, he is still trying to find his game offensively in the NHL. And when he was playing in the minors this year, he did have good offense. So he is capable of it. But, if he wants to be a number one or a number two defenseman in the NHL, like you simply don't play that role if you can't score kind of 50 to 60 points per season at a minimum. And so we'll see if he can add that aspect to his game at the NHL level. But again, he's young. I think he's 20 years old right now, so maybe 21. So, he's still got a lot of time to figure that part of it out. But I do think he deserves to be in the NHL probably next season, and I think he has value that he can provide. I think Daniel Boot could get there as well, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him play, maybe 50 games here and 30 games in the AHL, something like that. Like, I still don't think he's quite a full-time NHL player, but he still is showing good potential to get there. And then in terms of all the players that are playing in the Canadian Hockey League right now, that's TJ Gimla and Caleb Desnoyers and Cole Baudouin. The three of them are all eligible to go to the American Hockey League next year. And I think that they'll probably go there just based off of how they all dominated this year in their respective Canadian Hockey League leagues. But we'll see. And those guys all have the potential to play in the Memorial Cup this year as well. Which, if anybody's not familiar with the Memorial Cup, it's kind of like the national championship in the NCAA, but the Canadian equivalent of that. That's kind of the magnitude of it. And they say it's the hardest trophy in hockey to win. Like, a lot of people say it's harder to win than the Stanley Cup because you have to win your own league's trophy, and then you essentially go to this like Champions League format after that and go and compete for this trophy. And so TJ Gimla's in, Cole Baudouin and Caleb Desnoyers and Gabe Smith, if their teams all win their leagues, then they'll also be in it, and they're all very close. Like, they're all in the finals right now. And Desnoyers actually plays tonight for Game 7 of his conference final championship. So those guys, will have a good chance to develop and get some of these hard games under their belt. And maybe they're better off for it next season when I think they would be playing in the AHL.
So now that the Stanley Cup playoffs move on without us, without the Mammoth, you got Wild Avalanche Game 2 tonight. The Vegas Golden Knights stole Game 1 against the Ducks. How do you handicap those second round series?
Oh man, I think both of those games were close in very different ways. Anaheim and Vegas was a tight game. It was a 2-1 game plus an empty netter, right? That's obviously very tight. And my understanding is that had a couple calls gone the other way, the Ducks probably would have won that game. So that one, I don't think you can quite handicap it yet. Like, I think both teams are right there. The Wild and the Avalanche, they had the opposite end of the spectrum. It was 9-6. Like, that's just, when do you ever see that in the Stanley Cup playoffs, a 9-6 game, especially between two teams that are heralded to have some of the best defense in the entire league. And so, yeah, we'll see how that one goes. But it was kind of a back and forth effort. Like, Colorado would take a multi-goal lead, and then Minnesota would come back and tie it up, and then same thing would happen over again. And by the end, it was 9-6. But if Minnesota can get a few of their injured players back, like Joel Eriksson-Ek is probably the prime example. Like, if he can come back during the series, I think they have a lot better of a chance. But if I'm a betting man, I'd still probably put my money on Cale Makar and the Colorado Avalanche at this point.
I don't expect you to have any special insight on this, but I'm asking everyone in the hockey world because I think it's fascinating the way that Connor McDavid played hurt through this series. After their season was over, he talked about, kind of lamented, the fact that they've been average all year, and I think that a lot of conversation about how they don't have enough around him, and maybe a groundswell of support that he needs to get out of Edmonton. Does he stay with the Oilers for one more year?
Well, he's still got 2 years left on his contract, and he signed a 2-year contract earlier this season. So he intentionally made it so that he would stay for next season and the one after that. So for that reason, I think he's probably going to give them, those 2 years that he committed to. But then after that, I think that's where it kind of becomes like, okay, hey, I gave you the prime of my career. Now I got to go and do what's best for me. And so we'll see what that means. We'll see if that is what happens. But the fact that he signs the 2-year extension this season, I do think that means that he will probably come back and he'll probably stick it out. And if they trade him, I think it will be because they want to get something back for him so that they can restock the cupboards rather than him asking for a trade.
Makes sense.
Like you said, I don't have any inside information on what Connor McDavid's thinking, but that's kind of the way that I think of the situation that he's in.
No, it makes perfect sense on both fronts. And it feels like that would be a wildly unpopular decision for ownership up there in Edmonton if they decided to trade away the generational talent that they've got on the team. But I also understand why you'd want to do it.
That's true, but at the same time, they traded away Wayne Gretzky in the 80s, and they went and won the Stanley Cup the next year, or a couple of years after, rather. So, they've done it before, not necessarily, like, it wasn't necessarily the pieces that they got back for Wayne Gretzky that helped them win the Cup. But, the team does kind of have that history of, hey, we have the greatest player of our generation, trade him away, we can still be a good team. We'll see. Like you said, the Oilers probably don't necessarily have the depth around Connor McDavid to win without him. But, there is a little bit of a precedent for it there.
Brogan, appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of the exit interviews today. We'll pick your brain about those at some point, I'm sure, as well. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on.
Brogan Houston, Des News Mammoth Insider. And yes, Coach Bear, Coach not Coach Armstrong, Coach Bear, Bill Armstrong and company are expected to speak with the media today. And that's, I think, Bill Armstrong's been really great about kind of giving you some access to the big picture plan for this team. Now that they've crossed off that first item on the list, making it to the playoffs, everyone will tell you that it's harder and harder to advance, and that it's probably harder to advance in the playoffs than it is just to make it to the playoffs. Brogan made the correct point that the most important pieces on this team, the actual core of this team, is all locked up to long-term contract extensions. The accessory pieces, though, might be the thing that separates you from just making it to the playoffs and being a big-time playoff contender. What does that look like? Maybe we'll get some insight on it today. We are going to, in hour number 3, we're going to play some of the player exit interviews sound that we already have and that I promised to give you yesterday and we never got to. So that's still coming. We're going to take a quick break right here. But up next, we're giving away a round of golf in the Daily Dump, courtesy of the Festival of Tees, powered by the Utah Golf Association, brought to you by Mountain Home Services. We do it right here on my show. We do it on the Spence Checketts, The Drive with Spence Checketts from 2 to 6. Sun Hills is the course today. I'll tell you more about Sun Hills. I'll ask you a trivia question and give that away in the Daily Dump next. Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 792 FM, and the Daily Dump is brought to you by our friends at Valley Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning. Because Utah weather is so wild, you probably had the air conditioner on yesterday and the heater on today. Well, Valley Plumbing and the truck with the duck can handle problems if you encounter them with both. Also, plumbing is kind of where they buttered their bread for years and years and years, so still specialists in that as well. I told you I had a round of golf to give away from the Festival of Tees. Sun Hills, located in Davis County, beautiful views, challenging holes. Come check out what Sun Hills has to offer. Everything in the pro shop is at least 10% off, including new clubs. Some items are 40% off. 801-771-4814. A free round of golf at Sun Hills if you can answer this trivia question. 877-353-0700. If you can tell me, we've talked about it earlier with Victor Wembanyama's incredible defensive performance. The other two players that had triple-doubles in the playoffs with blocks as one of the triple-double stats. 877-353-0700. A free round at Sun Hills. All right, I don't mean to sound pretentious, but here's something that is unavoidable. I'm going to Wimbledon this year, you guys. Going to Wimbledon, bucket list, very excited to do it. I've never been. Incredibly pumped. You won't be listening anyway because it's 4th of July weekend when I'm gone, so you'll be out on a boat somewhere, hopefully being very safe and cautious with your fireworks. But trouble may be a-brewing, at least on the women's side of professional tennis. Coco Gauff, Arina Sabalenka, some of the top players in the world right now are threatening a boycott of the Grand Slam events, which, of course, would not be good for the top end of all tennis tournaments in the world. By the way, Arina Sabalenka right now is the number one ranked women's player in the world, and she has started to organize support for a potential boycott if tennis players don't start receiving a larger share of tournament revenues at the Grand Slams. On the men's side, number one, Jannik Sinner, including other top 10 players, issued a statement saying there's deep disappointment over the French Open prize money. Here's the quote: "Without us, there wouldn't be a tournament, and there wouldn't be that entertainment. I feel like definitely we deserve to get paid more percentage." That's a 4-time Grand Slam champion, and she said that at the Italian Open. Arina Sabalenka said that at the Italian Open. "I think at some point we will boycott it. I feel like that's going to be the only way to fight for our rights." She's 28 years old. They're looking for better representation, health options, pensions from the 4 Grand Slam tournaments. That's the Australian Open, the French Open, Wimbledon, and the U.S. Open. If you were going to try to get the maximum amount of leverage, the maximum amount of attention, the maximum amount of support from the fan base to be sympathetic to your plight, which of the Grand Slam tournaments, James, would you boycott in order to make the biggest splash in pro tennis?
The French or Wimbledon, is that, or are you saying out of all 4?
Well, of all 4.
Yeah, I mean, the one that I think around here anyway that would have the least damaging to the product of Grand Slam tennis would be, in all due respect, is boycotting the Australian Open. But that one's already passed this year. That's the least prestigious, at least around here, and maybe in Australia they it's the opposite, or that part of the world it's the opposite. Like U.S. Open might be the least prestigious, but around here it's, because we're in America, U.S. Open is one of the 3 prestigious, and then it's Australia. So I mean, from that standpoint, probably Australia. But for getting the most attention to their cause here, it's the French or Wimbledon.
If you boycott Wimbledon, when there's not a ton of other sports going on in the summer. I mean, that becomes the biggest story of the summer.
Yeah, people will notice when, and the French. I would say that for French Open too. Both of those French, there's a little bit more going on because that's this month, right? That's coming up a few weeks. Maybe if it's not this month, it's next month. But that's got a lot of prestige to it. Wimbledon is the one to do it if you're looking at the most attention. And for this kind of thing, attention is the currency. You're trying to send a message, and the way to send for your message to land the hardest is for you to boycott the biggest tournament on the schedule.
May 18th through June 7th is the French Open.
Okay, yeah, 2 weeks away.
Yeah, and then Wimbledon is 3 weeks after that. So, yikes.
I do wonder. I always wonder with this. What kind of damage to your career, and this is the risk. This is the risk you have to be willing to take. But what kind of damage to your career does boycotting a major tournament, a major event in any sport, a whole season, sometimes going on strike, is that worth what you're fighting for? And of course, if you're making that decision, you're saying, yes, it is worth what we're fighting for. Like, we're fighting for our livelihoods here. We want the revenue that we feel we've earned. We feel we have a right to. But I don't know. In the long run, are you going to be like, man, I probably would have. Things may have been a lot better for me if I had just kept playing.
It's a valid question. It's an important question. And here's, on the surface level, because I've been involved in a little bit of this with a share of revenue dispute in the MMA world. The UFC pays about 11 to 15% of their total revenue goes to the fighters. Now, we know in team leagues, in collectively bargain situations, it's more of a 50-50 split in the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NHL, et cetera, right? And the athletes are compensated accordingly. And we've seen some of what those numbers look like now, especially in baseball and in the NBA. It's just like, holy cow. You become a star, and then one season of your big contract is enough for you to live on for the rest of your life. These tennis players are not in that realm, but the French Open, which is coming up at Roland Garros, the revenue share right now is projected to be 14.9% of the total revenue is paid out in prize money. The French Open organizers announced last month they were increasing overall prize money by 10%, so $72 million basically will be handed out to all the players, which is up about $7.5 million from last year. But the players are like, yeah, but your revenue has gone up faster than your raises have gone up, so our revenue share has actually gone down. The problem with leverage for these mega players is that unless the French Open is just like, okay, well, if I don't have Coco Gauff and Yannick Sinner, I'm not playing. Like, we're just not going to conduct the tournament. If they boycott this tournament, it just means that someone further down the rankings who absolutely cannot afford to boycott any of these major tournaments, who's never won them before, who's not a household name, then that person wins the tournament and collects the prize money, and it actually works out better for the rank-and-file tennis player. This is where golf and tennis and auto racing and MMA and some of these are a lot different than team sports. Because when Steph Curry and LeBron James and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander are like, hey, we're boycotting, we're not playing, their whole team is not playing. If Yannick Sinner doesn't show up and I'm the 80th ranked player in the world, I'm like, hell yes, dude. I have a shot to win this thing now. So all these men ranked in the top 10, all these women ranked in the top 10, the ones who have the leverage, who have the power to say, hey, your tournament is a lot less appealing if I'm not there. So I'm going to boycott. Yeah, that is a motivator for the tournament to look at its policies, for these Grand Slams to look at and say, okay, how badly do we need these players? But that's the question they're going to ask. Not, hey, can we still conduct a tournament? The question is going to be, how badly do we need Arena Sabalenka? Individual sports, you have so much less leverage to foment like true rebellion and change. I mean, it took until Muhammad Ali, literally in boxing, boxing was just like so heavily in favor of promoters all through its history. And it was a long-standing sport. I mean, boxing has been done for hundreds and hundreds of years. And up to that point, had been done at a very high and a very lucrative level for a long time. It literally took until Muhammad Ali was like, no, you know what? I need transparency. I need revenue share to be favorable to fighters. It became the Ali Act became a thing. It took until Muhammad Ali, who was a transcendent personality, until boxing actually was kind of forced to make some changes and to allow boxers to have a little bit more power. This is like, I don't know if any of these individuals, even as great as they are, the number one ranked players in the world, are going to be, at the end of this, more powerful than the Grand Slam tournaments themselves.
80th ranked men's player in the world. You want to know?
Yeah, who
it is? The Italian Mattia Bellucci.
Oh, yeah. If I'm Mattia Bellucci, I'm just like, you're telling me that Yannick Sinner's not going to be there?
The Italian Stallion.
You tell me that Spanish kid's not going to be there? The top 10 are just lopping themselves off the field?
And to your point about individual sports not having the same leverage because you don't have the same unity, right?
Yeah.
It's not the same incentive structure for everybody. It isn't in team sports either for individual players, but because you're a team, you kind of have to go in and go out as a team, right? And they do. The big players are incentivized to help the rank and file a little bit in labor negotiations. It's not that way with individual sports. The example of what it took for golf, for PGA Tour members to get more prize money was Phil Mickelson and Greg Norman and a bunch of guys, a bunch of top players in the world. It took them creating the Saudis it took them creating a whole rival golf league and giving them hundreds of millions of dollars of guaranteed money for the PGA to be like, oh, we should increase our prize money. We need to increase our prize money. That's probably not going to happen in tennis because, I mean, that live golf has not been successful. I don't imagine these tennis players would be like, you know what, let's try what they did. They might make more money in the short term, but their careers wouldn't be any better. So that's not going to happen in tennis. So, but that's the kind of thing that it probably takes for in these individual sports for this kind of change to happen. And to your point, I'm not sure that there's enough players that are going to be like, yeah, we'll follow you, world leaders in our sport, world ranking leaders in our sport. We'll follow you and not play this great tournament instead of me getting an easier chance to win one of the most prestigious titles in sports. I don't think that's happening.
And you're like, okay, there's $72 million in prize money being handed out at the French Open, and then slightly more than that at Wimbledon in effectively a 1 month span. And the top players are all going to leave, and I'm whatever. If you're the top 25 players are all boycotting, or the top 50 players are all boycotting, and I'm number 26 or I'm number 51, I'm like, man, do I jump on with them and believe in my own ability to climb the rankings further, and then I'll be with them and I'll suffer through these, lean times in order to have a greater payout at the other side? Or do I cross the labor line? Am I a scab in this tournament, and do I get the biggest payday of my career in an easier field? I mean, it's like, I know that in principle it's better to do the first thing. But the reality of a situation is, and this is the problem that we've had in combat sports, right? If Ronda Rousey and Conor McGregor are just like, and John Jones, this is what John Jones has done. He's like, I'm not fighting for you unless you give me $40 million. He's the best that's ever done it. And you know what the response was? Okay. We'll bring up the next one. And that guy will fight for $1 million. And our profit margin will stay as robust as it has always been. Right now, by the way, the Professional Tennis Players Association, the PTPA, is 7 years old. So it's not exactly a powerful body. Right now, the official union for tennis players is the Association of Tennis Professionals, the ATP. The ATP represents guess who? Players and tournaments. It's like the NFL and the NFLPA being in the same building.
Yeah, I mean, they're called the ATP World Rankings, so they're kind of management and and the union. That's not going to go very
well. They represent both sides of the argument. So what's good for the tournaments is good for the ATP. Also, what's good for the players is good for the ATP. So the ATP has interest in being like, well, let's get everyone to the same table and we want to make everyone feel happy. But it's not automatic for them to be fighting for the best interest of the players in this case. And that's why a boycott is being threatened.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, I hope that if they do decide to boycott, that it is effective because, I mean, there's more money to go around for everybody than generally what gets led on by a lot of management, right? And I want that to be spread around, but my question is how effective is that going to be, and are they going to regret it because their careers? They're going to regret that move for what it did to their careers later.
And
I don't know.
I hope this works for the players. I'm very pro player in this regard, but because 15% of a tournament's revenue going to the athletes that are the absolute showpiece of the tournament, not nearly enough. It should be closer to in my bare minimum for me would be like a 60-40 split. 70-30, I could probably, if it, put you in like $10 million range for winning the whole thing, but like 15% of the UFC money going to the fighters, 15% of the French Open money going to the players, 15% of the Wimbledon money going to the players is embarrassingly low. It's terrible. You're telling me that the owners of those clubs and the organizers of those events deserve 85% of the revenue? We don't tune in to watch them. Actually, this was just released yesterday. There's a guy named Ari Emanuel who's the CEO of TKO Holdings, which is the parent company that owns the UFC and the WWE and stuff. The tax filings were released and his salary was reported. He made $67 million when there's fighters literally competing for $10,000, and he made $67 million to be the boss who doesn't. I mean, I get it, right? It's an apples and oranges comparison. To be the leadership of a mega company and to be wildly profitable, you should be compensated handsomely. But if your $67 million paycheck is coming from the 85% split that you're keeping away from the athletes, that's criminal. And if that's the case with these tennis tours and these tennis tournaments, yuck. That's your daily dump, by the way. I went really long on that. I didn't expect to. Valley Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning. The truck with the duck will take care of all of it for you. Okay, we're going to double up here, and we're going to go to Stormy Buonantony at the top of hour number 3. After that, I promise you, I will give you the Utah place in the latest ESPN preseason football rankings, and you're not going to like it. Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM.
This is the Sean O'Connell Show, your home of the best insight of your Utes. Let's get back to OC from the Murdoch Chevrolet studio of ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM.
Sean O'Connell Show continues here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, and we are happy to welcome Stormy Buonantony. You have seen her on the NHL playoffs. You see her on the sidelines during college football. And hopefully we'll see her sooner than later again here in Salt Lake City, although I guess it would be in college football now that the Utah Mammoth are out. Stormy, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. And yes, I've spent a good amount of time in Salt Lake for football, but a good amount this past first round watching the Mammoth, which was a blast. Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to talk about that. Obviously, you know, we unfortunately have to move on to the second round, and the Mammoth are not part of that second round. Your hometown Las Vegas Golden Knights were able to knock out a fresh Mammoth team, their first foray into the playoffs. But I just wanted to get your sense of not only the team and its competitiveness in that first playoff run, but I think from a larger scale, where they belong now already in the NHL. You hear players and coaches and pundits around the league talking about, you know, the way that this team has already developed a reputation for treating its players well. Maybe Salt Lake can actually be a destination in hockey the way that we've struggled to be in NBA basketball, and you get to talk to more people than I do. So your sense of what the Mammoth can grow into with this good start.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of excitement, rightfully so, about what Utah's been able to do just in its second year out there in Salt Lake. And I think last season there was a lot of figuring out what are we, didn't even have a name. And now you are in a position where it wasn't a question of if this team was going to make the playoffs, but how they were going to get there, because there was such a firm belief they were going to get to that point. And we're very competitive with Vegas. I honestly feel for the Mammoth, and I feel for Mammoth fans knowing that the first 5 games of that series, they had third period leads and then still found themselves down 3-2 and on the brink of elimination. And even when Kyler Yamamoto scored that goal in the third period, you think, okay, there's life. We got a game here. And then obviously things fell to the wayside and Vegas closed out the job. But what Utah has in terms of the blend of youth and experience, you see what Montreal is doing right now. They're the youngest team in the playoffs, but Utah was the second youngest team in the postseason. And there is so much to build on. I mean, the way that we saw Clayton Keller become such a leader and drive the bus for this team, Logan Cooley, Dylan Gunther, and the shot that he has, but mixed with some of that better leadership and guys who have cup experience. I think it's a really fun blend that you guys have, and a fan base that is really excited about that team and organizational feel as a whole, as you said, like what Ryan Smith has done to keep fans engaged and trying to get new fans, what he was doing in his owner's suite on Twitter to saying, hey, hit me up if you haven't been to a game, like prioritizing people that hadn't been there so that they could fall in love with the team and the sport, I thought was really special. Yeah,
it's pretty cool. You did allude to, I think, one of the most heartbreaking things about the series for Mammoth fans in that there were those blown leads, and you felt like not only, hey, we're in the playoffs, we're just happy to be here. It's like this is a series that they could have won, and they played their way into leading positions and should have been able to close it out potentially. But what was missing and what caused them to give up those leads? Is it just a simple, hey, you don't have playoff experience and the Knights are built for this, they've been here before? Because I know that we get like it can become cliche, like, oh, you got to grow into this, or you got to be there first, and then next year's the time that you'll actually win it. The Knights are a good example of how it doesn't have to be that way with all the success they had when they were a brand new expansion franchise. But when you watch this series so closely, what was the missing piece for the Mammoth in your mind?
Sure. And I'll say for Vegas, like, they're the exception, not the rule, right? What they were able to do in year one as an expansion franchise and go all the way to the Stanley Cup final is absurd and ridiculous. And fans across the country have been mad at Vegas ever since for it. It hasn't gone away. But with Utah, I think maybe there is an element of that. And I did appreciate Andre Tourigny kind of repeatedly throughout the series challenging that youth versus experience narrative to an extent and saying how even some of the young guys on this roster have played in pivotal games in different areas of their careers, just not the NHL postseason specifically. That said, it did feel like Vegas had a bit of a killer instinct in their game in the third period and in overtime, and drawing Utah into some of those undisciplined penalties with some of those younger pieces. It felt like there was, like, to me at least, a comfort in the uncomfortable for Vegas, whereas Utah in a lot of those moments did, in my opinion, like, I just perceived them to potentially be learning a little bit. And maybe that's inaccurate. Maybe it was just bounces found Vegas more than Utah. But to me, I do think that experience played a role. But now the good news is they have that, right? And they were able to gain that experience this postseason and can learn for it and put it into action next year.
I can't decide if I like the developing rivalry for Vegas enough to say I don't want to see the Golden Knights succeed moving forward, or if it's like, hey, they're the team that knocked you out. Now I want to see them, like, that means something. Let them make a run to the cup again. And they sneak out to a one-game lead so far in this second-round series over the Ducks while Bill Karlsson is back. When you look at what this Golden Knights team is capable of moving forward after beating the Mammoth, what is their ceiling in these playoffs?
Yeah, and I was on the broadcast last night, and I know Vegas was not particularly pleased with their game in that game one, yet they were still able to come out with a win. And I just talked about the experience and the confidence they have in late game moments. That showed again last night for them to pull away and get that win in the third period. They've been masterful in third periods all season long, but to do it in the postseason the way they have, I think shows exactly what we're talking about here. My gut, like, ESPN has us make our picks for each series going into each one, and I did pick Vegas to win the series in 6. I think they advance to the Western Conference Final, but the road probably ends there. Knowing what Colorado or the Minnesota Wild have on the other side, I think is just a little bit of a different level than where Vegas is at this season. So to me, their peak this year is Western Conference Final. I would love to be proven wrong, especially like you mentioned earlier, living in this city. And I know how fun Vegas can be when the Golden Knights are good and at a high level. That said, to go back to your point about the rivalry, I would love for this to be something that grows over the years, especially because of the footprint, right? And that Utah used to be in the Vegas TV market before this team ultimately came to town. And like what Ryan Smith did with trading in the Golden Knights jerseys for Mammoth jerseys. And my first job in hockey was with the Golden Knights. And I remember vividly, like, the VGK road trip that they would do every summer in the off season, going to Salt Lake City and going to, like, Wyoming and Montana and all these different places to become kind of that second team in the Rocky Mountain region outside of Colorado. And Utah was a big part of that footprint. And so to know, like, you guys kind of stole a little bit of that footprint and are young and up and coming and a rock solid playoff team in the future playing in the Pacific Division, I would love to see what this can grow into over the years.
Stormy Buonantony's our guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN college football and NHL reporter. She's got her own show on Sirius XM on the VSiN network. It feels like with the USA gold medal, and obviously here in Salt Lake City, like we become our own bubble and our own little echo chamber. And I'm like, this is a real moment for hockey in the United States of America, because you got the gold and the league is growing and these NHL playoffs have been incredible and everyone seems like is watching. The reality of the NHL is they have been a relatively distant fourth place in the major sports, but it's just, now that we have our own team, I find myself being like, let's fix that. This is way better than NBA playoffs. This is second to only football. Do you still view the NHL and professional hockey as a growth sport in the grand scheme of things in the United States?
I think that the ratings will tell you that story, right? And I think hockey at its core, because of the difficulty to get involved in it and how expensive of a sport it is for equipment, for travel, for all of those things, it makes it a little bit more difficult at the grassroots level to have the expansiveness that a sport like basketball, for example, does, where you can just pick up a ball and go play pickup at a hoop anywhere. You have to have ice. You have to have equipment. You have to have different things to get you involved. And I think that's at least part of why hockey has been on that tier, because it's it's one of those sports that the access to it is more difficult at a younger level. I think organizations like Vegas, like Utah, specifically getting people and young people into a sport that maybe they weren't familiarized can change and grow that. So yes, I do view it still as a growth sport, big picture nationwide. However, you mentioned it. It is growing, and the television ratings that we're seeing this year from the first round of the playoffs and entering the second are the highest that they have ever been. They're setting records. It's kind of, in my mind, catapulted with Four Nations a year ago, and seeing the U.S. and Canada go at it. And then obviously, as you referenced, the Olympics this year and what that continued to build into. I think that this sport can and should become bigger and bigger and bigger, because there's nothing like it. Like I say this all the time, and I've covered every sport across the book. There is no better live event experience in sports than live hockey. It is just different. And so I think another part of our goal as television broadcasters is trying to make that more consumable on TV, because it is a more difficult watch, I think, on television as well. Just because the puck is small, and when you're in person, you see the physicality, you see the technical detail that it takes to skate and set up things the way that they do. It's amazing. I love this sport so much, and nothing would make me happier to see this become bigger than the NBA. I don't know if that'll happen, but that's my dream.
I also wonder, and I don't know if it matters to other people, it matters a lot to me, like growing into technical proficiency and learning more about the sport and understanding more and more of what you see. It's a heck of a lot easier in hockey to get on board with it because of, for me, the athletes. As far as professional athletes go, hockey guys are like the coolest, the most laid back, seemingly as passionate or more passionate about their sport than any other professional athlete is. They play hurt more than everyone does. You don't get conversations about load management. You don't talk about like, oh, yeah, I don't want to play in the Winter Classic. I don't want to play in the Olympics. I don't want to play in the Four Nations because I need to focus on my NHL career, what actually matters, my paycheck. And just the culture of hockey is so refreshing, given how even our college sports now have become more and more and more about money and business conversations.
No question about it. There is a toughness to the NHL that I appreciate so much. I mean, look at even the Edmonton Oilers, who just got knocked out of the first round by Anaheim, and Connor McDavid, he was visibly hurt. He's playing through a fractured ankle. I have seen players behind the scenes who are on a rolly thing for an injury, like those little scooters,
Yeah, yes.
They aren't walking day to day around the facility or anything like that, yet strap on a skate and go block shots in an NHL Stanley Cup playoff game. It's ridiculous. And so, yes, when you're going to an NHL game, that if a guy can play, he's going to play. You don't have to worry about that. And just another reason, like you said, to fall in love with this sport, these dudes are different. And it makes me excited about, for example, the Kachuk Brothers podcast, Wingmen, that they've come out, so that people can start to see some of these athletes' personality a little bit more. Hockey is definitely a more team and we over I type of a sport. And at times they can get into the cliche answers and just wanting to say the right thing. And I think if some of these athletes would let you in a little bit more and see their personality, because they're some of the funnest and coolest dudes out there too. If they let people see that a little bit more league-wide, I think that would really help the cause as well.
I'm going to be unfair, and I'm going to ask you a college football question when you're in full hockey mode.
Okay.
Because it's been a wild offseason here in Salt Lake City. And as we talked about, you spent a lot of time here on the sidelines covering a Utah team that for so many years, it was just like death, taxes, and Utah football, to quote Joel Klatt. It was always Kyle Whittingham. You know what this team is going to look like. You know what this team is going to be identity-wise. And I think we're going to get a continuation of that with the new coach, Morgan Scalley. But I have not yet talked to you and got your perspective on the offseason this program has had, on the departure of Kyle Whittingham, him going to Michigan, and now a fresh start here in Salt Lake for a guy who played under Kyle Whittingham, coached his whole career under Kyle Whittingham, but is now taking that baton and hopefully running with it. Your thoughts on a new brand of Utah football, given that what we have covered and you have covered for so long has been, kind of the same.
Yeah, I know it's got to be a little bit surreal for some fans in the area, knowing that Whittingham has been at the helm for the last 2 decades. And then when you think he's retiring and passing the torch to Morgan Scally, he actually isn't retiring and goes over to Michigan. And
Yes.
I mean, and kudos to Michigan on the standpoint of, for as much like turmoil and controversy as they've had, bringing in as rock solid of a human and a coach as you can imagine. But obviously that takes away from Utah, and he takes Jason Beck with him as well, who had the relationship that he had with Devin Dampier, who I think that's such a feather in the cap for Morgan Scally to not only keep Dampier, but Bird Ficklin as well, and seeing what that can look like offensively with the two of them, and knowing that there's no hostility between them, that they're like brothers, they're best friends. They don't live together, but basically do. They're together as much as they are. And I think that was huge for him. But in terms of continuity, I feel like Morgan Scally is going to keep a lot of that, right? Like, he learned from every step of the way, Kyle Whittingham. He's been a part of this program for years and years and years. He was always the head coach in waiting and was probably a little bit tired of waiting. And if he had to wait anymore, he probably would have been the one to leave. So for him to be a young, up-and-coming guy that has the same mentality and has been building that defense and the identity of the defense for years, I feel like Utah's still going to be in a really good place.
That's the hope. Fingers crossed. And obviously, when we get to college football season, we'll be talking to you about that as well. When do you start shifting into that mode? After the Stanley Cup playoffs?
Yes, I need to get through the Cup for sure. And I keep tabs on things here and there at the other network that I work for, VSiN, that you mentioned on Sirius XM. One of my good friends and fellow host, Tim Murray, he does like every 3-week college football podcast in the off season. And so that really helps keep me at least dialed on the news and everything that's going on, aside from Brendan Sorsby, because that certainly caught my attention. Neither here nor there. But yes, after the Stanley Cup final is really when I start to shift my attention much more deep into both college football and the NFL.
Well, hold on. Because you mentioned it, is Brendan Sorsby playing college football in the 2026 season?
I don't know how he can. So I will be keeping tabs on this every time there is a new development as we go. But the rules with the NCAA are as clear as day on what you can and cannot do, especially around sports betting, whether a lot of it is correct or incorrect. I mean, the fact that Sorsby was betting on games that his team was in, yes, it was to win, and yes, it was games that he wasn't involved in. It's very blatantly and clearly against the rules. You, as an NCAA athlete or employee at any level, cannot bet on any of the sponsored sports under the NCAA umbrella or professional sports that are under that umbrella. They are very strict and clear on what those are. And for you to blatantly avoid that and have all of these betting apps on your phone, while also having I can't remember the name of the app that the NCAA makes you have on your phone as an athlete now as a part of this. But while having like that betting thing on your phone as well, it's just stupidity. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for that when you know the rules and blatantly break them. So I'm very curious to see how this is going to play out.
I will be watching it very closely as well. And we look forward to more conversations when we get to that point in the season. Have fun with the rest of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Wish our Mammoth were continuing, but it's worth watching. Anyone out there, even with your team out, I promise you these series in the West and even in the East have been really fascinating so far. Stormy, I think you're one of the best in the business. I appreciate you giving us some time today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Hope to talk to you soon.
Stormy Buonantony, ESPN college football and NHL insider reporter. You'll see her on the sidelines. You will see her rinkside. She does a fantastic job. And if you like the gambling flavor, especially on things, check her out on SiriusXM and VSiN Live. Lots left to get to here on the Sean O'Connell Show. Don't go anywhere. It's ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Sean O'Connell Show continues on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. We're going to play you some Clayton Keller sound from exit interviews for the Utah Mammoth. But I wanted to touch on this today. You know, it's the heart of an offseason now for Utah football. You've got players basically grinding, lifting, finishing their academic requirements. I think that school is out already. I think graduation already happened. But you've got a dead period, a silent period, so to speak, for players to just toil away and improve themselves physically until we get to fall camp. Because the transfer portal window was reduced down to the single one, the ghost transfer rules have been put in place. There's not a lot of personnel movement. There's not going to be a lot of personnel movement. There's a couple like random. I found out I have extra eligibility, and now I have a special dispensation. I can go look for a spot to land. You're not going to get any meaningful additions to this roster, and nobody is really. So it's all about off-season storylines, and it's all about the Brendan Sorsby type stuff. And are you doing anything you're not supposed to be doing that's going to now result in a suspension? Of course, injuries are a problem that can even happen just in an off-season workout protocols, but we'll keep our fingers crossed that none of that affects really anyone in the Big 12 because you want to see the best sample of football from this conference. But ESPN is always looking for things to grab our attention, and in this case, to upset us. So Eli Lederman, Max Olson, and Adam Rittenberg, the lead college football writers at ESPN, collaborated on ranking the offseason for every Power 4 college football team. And in the Big 12, they broke it down by conference. In the Big 12, Utah comes in. Well, you know what? I'm just gonna go down and James, you tell me when you expect to hear me read Utah's name next, okay? Number 1. No surprises here. Texas Tech Red Raiders. Key additions: Brendan Sorsby, maybe, question mark. Outside linebacker Trey White, outside linebacker Adam Trick. Key departures: Jacob Rodriguez, David Bailey, Lee Hunter. All of those guys went into the NFL. Bailey, of course, was the number 2 overall pick. Top incoming recruits: outside linebacker LaDamian Guyton, offensive tackle Felix Ojo. The Utes were in on him temporarily. Wide receiver Chase Campbell. What went wrong in their offseason? Texas Tech's offseason was looking ideal until about 2 weeks ago when the school first learned that Sorsby was under NCAA investigation for sports betting. That's a big deal. Number 2 in the Big 12, BYU Cougars. Key additions: Cade Uluave, Paki Finau, Walker Lyons. Key departures: Jack Kelly, Chase Roberts, Tanner Wall. What went wrong? They talk about the Parker Kingston situation there. What went right? LJ Martin agreeing to come back. Number 3, Arizona Wildcats. What? Number 4, Houston Cougars. Wait, what?
Yeah, I would have expected Utah to be in 3 or 4. I'll say that.
Number 5, Oklahoma State Cowboys. Key additions: Drew Mestemaker, Caleb Williams, Wyatt Young. What went wrong at Oklahoma State? Well, it's one of the most ambitious roster flips we've ever seen in college football. 1-11 season a year ago. 25 players are returning from last year's roster.
That was awful, by the way.
Yeah, number 6. Certainly Utah's got to be here.
Got to be.
TCU Horned Frogs. Number 7 in the offseason rankings.
Well, hold on. TCU makes sense. They only lost their starting quarterback.
Well, they brought in another quarterback, as everyone does. They did okay in the recruiting world.
You know who didn't lose their starter or their backup? Oh, yeah, Utah.
What went wrong? TCU was expecting Hoover to return for his 4th year as the Horned Frogs starter. He opted to enter the portal and join defending national champion Indiana for obvious reasons. Number 7. All right, here we are.
Yeah.
Nope, actually not. Arizona State Sun Devils. Key additions: Amarian Miller, wide receiver; Reed Harris, wide receiver; linebacker Owen Long. Key departures: best receiver in college football. Best receiver in the Big 12. Offensive tackle who ended up being a first-round draft picks.
Oh, but they have their quarterback. They have their really talented quarterback, though. Right?
No,
they don't.
He's at LSU. Did okay in the incoming recruiting. All right, number 8 in the Big 12 Conference. That's where they've got Utah ranked in their offseason rank.
They got them right in the middle. And listen, I'm not one that thinks that they should be the favorites to win the conference. I'm not sure there's anyone that feels that way, even with Brendan Sorsby probably not playing for Texas Tech. You got to believe in what they got going down there in Lubbock, because proof of concept from last year. BYU deserves to be 2 as well, but
look,
come
on paper, if Sorsby is out, on paper, BYU is the best team in the league.
They probably are, yeah.
And I don't love saying that on the home of the Utes, but look, Kalani Sitake and what they've got going on down there, they deserve credit for not losing anyone important in the transfer portal. Nobody of real significance left BYU in the transfer portal. 0 players. How many schools can say that?
When you lost your defensive coordinator to Michigan, and that guy brought in a bunch of players, and some of those went to the NFL this year,
dude,
but the others decided to stay at BYU.
You lost Jack Kelly, who was like this incredible player who's now going to be, I think, he's going to overperform his draft pick in the NFL. You lose Jack Kelly to graduation, and you bring in a guy who's probably going to be better than Jack Kelly in Kedu Luave. Do you know how ridiculous that is? So BYU is probably going to be the number 1 team if Brendan Sorsby is ineligible. And by the way, that's all going to be based, Texas Tech, their whole thing is going to be based on no Brendan Sorsby and or how long does it take Will Hammond to get back from the injury.
Right. If Will Hammond's not back till October, like the projections are right now, that's going to be tough to overcome 4 games. You're probably going to have multiple losses there.
And I actually need to do some digging on this because I was having a conversation yesterday. You know, like everyone is on peptides right now. The Ozempic thing, and there's one for men called Retta that everyone's doing. So all your old high school buddies are getting lean and shredded doing these peptides. I don't know what the banned substance / drug testing / whatever. I don't know how it handles these peptide injections. I don't know, but there are peptides now that are all about strengthening your tendons. There's peptides that are designed to help you heal faster. There's a peptide for every dang thing under the sun right now. If you're Texas Tech, you're calling the number 1 peptide doctor in America, and you're saying, is there any way that we can get our backup quarterback, Will Hammond, our projected backup quarterback, we can get him back sooner? Anyway, sorry for the little aside. So the on paper, I get it. The on paper is not hyper favorable to Utah compared to Texas Tech or to BYU. And other teams, I should say, did a really nice job bringing in reinforcements based on what they were losing. And obviously there's teams that are bringing back important players. We're going to have Adam Rittenberg on as soon as we can to talk all things college football. And I promise you, Adam Rittenberg does not think that Utah is going to be the 8th best team in the Big 12 Conference. This is an off-season ranking, but the off-season ranking for Utah is, I think, being dragged heavily because of, for the first time in 21 years, uncertainty around a program that people that grew to be so certain of. Now, I love this because it's bulletin board material for Morgan Scalley. It's reinforcement for the chip that is already on the shoulder for this team. It's a legitimate, like, hey, we operated for a decade plus on the respect of our head coach. And that's true. Utah was oftentimes overestimated because people respected Kyle Whittingham so much. Now they're going back to a place where they are being underestimated because people don't know what they've got in Morgan Scalley and Jordan Gross and Kevin McGivern and Colton Swan and all those guys. This is not a who had, a bad offseason nationally. This is a conference list that says Houston had a better offseason than you. Oklahoma State had a better offseason. Oklahoma State replaced their longtime head coach and are coming off a one-win season where they didn't even have players you want to bring back. Utah, yes, they lost some things. John Henry Daly, we're going to wish he stayed. And I think he's going to wish he stayed also.
But with JHD, he probably not playing this year anyway.
That's why I say I think he's going to wish he stayed.
Yeah.
Because guess what's going to happen to him? He's going to sit out this year or most of this year at the University of Michigan, and Michigan has 2 5-stars and 3 4-stars in that room that are younger than him and have a better injury history than them, who then are going to stay in front of him. And he's going to be like, oh, what? Anyway, that's no longer our business. Yeah, you lost some guys and you lost important members of this coaching staff. I'm never going to downplay that because Jason Beck was a loss. Lewis Powell was a big loss. Jim Harding is a loss. But this is a wild, wild underestimation of what Utah is bringing back. And if I'm Bird Ficklin and Devin Dampier especially, I'm just like, oh, we have 2 excellent players at the most important position in college football, and people are saying that we're cooked. All right, let's see.
Yeah, you hope that it adds extra motivation just to give some kind of to try to figure out why they're being underestimated this much by their own conference. It's obviously losing Kyle Whittingham. Is great. As much respect as people have for Morgan Scalley, that's still uncertainty there. How's it going to be under a new head coach? That's valid. 5 new offensive line starters. You lost 2 first-round picks. New offensive line coach and Jim Harding, very respected offensive line coach. You don't have him in the building anymore. Okay, that's valid. I just don't know that it's valid enough to be like, yeah, Oklahoma State, like you said, TCU, who lost their starting quarterback. I don't know about that.
You would not hear me making a case for Utah over pretty much anyone that actually makes sense. But like Arizona State's offseason, they lost their starting quarterback who they thought they were going to get to keep, who they paid $4 million last year.
Who was... If not for him having an injury-riddled season last year, we might have been talking about him as the best quarterback in the conference. Like, he's that kind of a talent. He played that way, that well the year before on a year that ASU won the conference. Like, that's a huge loss. Yeah. And you lost the top receiver in the conference to the first round of the NFL draft.
I find myself in a funny spot because I'm ranting against the logic behind this list, while I'm also happy that this is what ESPN and other national publications, and this is what people are going to do with Utah this year.
Yeah.
This is what people are going to do with Utah until they win 10 games probably. They're going to say, we don't believe in you anymore. We don't know, guys. The national perspective, I can tell you, the national perspective on this Kyle Whittingham situation was that it was mismanaged badly. Yeah. That is the national perspective on how the exit of Kyle Whittingham was handled. I have talked with enough people who cover college football for a living. We've interviewed plenty of them. And the overarching, like, hey, what the heck was that? Now affects the remaining team negatively. So everybody now, well, you got to show me. Morgan, you got to show me, Devin Dampier, that you can win without Jason Beck. You got to show me, Bird Ficklin, that you're actually going to give us 10 touchdowns again next year. I love it. I love all of it because I think that it suits the culture and the personality of the university, the football team, even the state a little bit better.
Yeah.
I actually think one of the things that works against BYU most heavily this year is that they're going to be doing the thing that Utah did the last 2 seasons, patting themselves on the back before they deserve it. I think that that's going to happen a lot. And I think it's going to be detrimental ultimately. I think that BYU is going to roll into a game this year thinking like, our you-know-what doesn't stink, and we're going to win this game just because we can roll our helmets out there, and it's not going to work well. We saw Utah do that a couple of times. We saw Utah do that like 4 times in previous seasons. This is interesting, though, that for the first time in at least a decade, because Kyle Whittingham's reputation really got to be where it's at now in the last 10, 12 years. Even after he had won the Sugar Bowl, when they made the leap into the Pac-12, there was still some like national pundits that were just like, yeah, but it's Utah. They're still just Utah. And it took some time for the program and the recruiting and everything to catch up to make Utah kind of like the most popular of all of the, I also haven't thought about them in a while teams. Utah became like the power version of a Boise State. Were universally respected even if people didn't know about you. That status is gone. It now lives in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So Utah is going to have to earn every little bit, every little thing moving forward. And I like it.
Yeah, and I think it's fair, like we around here and on this show, on our station, I think the consensus is that Utah will probably be somewhere in the top 3, if not maybe win the conference, right? That's kind of the neighborhood that we feel like they're in. I can understand because even at this conference level that's making this list, I can understand them not having that kind of confidence in Morgan Scalley because he's an unknown, like we mentioned with Jordan Gross. I left out Kevin McGivern replacing Jason Beck, another unknown. 3 very important coaches right? That left your program, and the most important as well at the head coaching position. I understand not them saying, you know what? No, there's no way I can put them near the top of in the top 3 of the conference, but I don't know how you drop them lower than 5. I just really don't, with how much they were able to retain. And if you really did a little bit of homework and saw just how good people feel about the program, the people who are involved in the program feel about the program right now, despite all that change, it kind of, how can you have them lower than top 5 in the conference in the projection? But like you said, it probably will help Utah more than them being projected closer to where they ought to be, Will.
All right. Went a little bit longer than I wanted to. We'll take a break. Clayton Keller Sound next, and we'll talk with Spence for some crosstalk. It's the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. All right, more exit interviews from the Utah Mammoth organization happening today. Actually, right after the show is when that media availability is going to happen, so we won't be able to make it on time. But players already did their locker room exit interviews, and wanted to give you sound from the captain, Clayton Keller, unwrapping
now
the
we
season.
kind of got a taste of how hard it is to get into the playoffs. Like, it always comes down to the very end, and every team's fighting and so hungry. So going into next year, we've got a taste of it, and now that's like the standard for us. Like, it's a playoffs or it's a bust. Like, now we kind of got.
Similar does it look next year to what we saw this year? Because obviously there were so many really good things, and this is a team that very obviously has a lot of skill. They've got a lot of speed. The youth is on their side for the next few years. If we're opening a window now to a Stanley Cup playoff contention, Stanley Cup contention, 2, 3, 4 years, are you going to try to, because he has said, and Coach Bear has said, well, we want physicality, we want size, we want to be a team that you're a little bit afraid to play against. That's not the way that they were most successful this year. So I'm really curious to see what kind of tweaks are made, if any, because as we have said many times already, the nucleus of what the team is going to be for the foreseeable future is locked in, and you're not going to trade any of these guys. You don't need to compile a bunch of draft assets. And I don't think there's going to be the type of players that you need available on the trade market to go take a big swing and bring in like one of the top 5 defensemen in the league or something like that. If that even is a goal of yours right now, which I don't think it is, because they like their top defensive pairings. They like their blue line. They like the numbers, especially around their blue line. I think you have to figure out a better backup goalie so that Veggie is not constantly needed, so that he can be rested a little bit more. And I don't even just mean physically. I mean, like, there's a mental strain to being the guy who's got to be in there every single night, because you can only put your backup out there when you don't expect much from the opposition. The little tweaks are going to be very, very important for this franchise in the offseason. I'm sure Bill Armstrong will have some thoughts on it, as will Coach Bear. Will Coach Bear be the guy, right? Because good is sometimes the enemy of great. And if we all agree, and I think we do, that Coach Bear has done a really good job with this team, is he the guy that the franchise on the top level, does ownership think that he is a great coach? Does ownership and the team president, do they think that Bear Tourney is the guy that can get you through 2-3 rounds of Stanley Cup playoffs and season this team into being, by 2027, 2028, a real cup contender? Don't know. All right, that was the captain. Now let's Lawson Krause, who is the alternate captain and a guy that deserves a little shout out for a really, really impressive playoff performance, especially, says they'll be back.
I say this a bunch. When I view leadership, for me, it's not something that I just force. I think for me, it's just being the person that I am, and I think everything else kind of follows that. And, for me, it's focusing on things like commitment, consistency, hard work, and, putting the team above myself. And I think our entire team took huge strides in that this year, and that's a big reason of why we had success. And like I said, we're all sad we're not still playing, but we will learn and we will be back.
That last sentence might be the best way to sum up the sort of overall sentiment of the complete exit interviews that we heard from players. Some variation on that concept, obviously in greater detail, was expressed by everyone. That, yeah, man, this sucks, but we are going to be a team to be reckoned with in the future. And Lawson Krause has been around. He knows. He's seen it. He's played against the best. He's played with the best. He's one of those guys that many people on this team, many people around this team wanted to emphasize the fact that, yes, the group itself, the team, the squad together does not have playoff experience as a unit, but a lot of people do have playoff experience, and a lot of people have been on teams with Stanley Cup winners, or they've been Stanley Cup winners themselves. So that collaborative effort, that learning process, you have to give credit where it's due, and there's guys in this room now that are capable of teaching the younger players, the right way to do it. Experience is going to be the best teacher, and now they have that playoff experience, and I'm sure everyone on this roster is going to be haunted by the fact that you had a bunch of leads. You had 3 third-period leads that all got squandered. What was it, Game 4? Yeah, Game 4. You could have gone up 3-1 in the series. You were 52 seconds away from going up 3-1 in the series, and that changes everything if you can do it. Speaking of people with optimistic future outlooks, Logan Cooley mentioned that he doesn't think there's much limit to what this team can do.
I don't think, there's a limit on what we can accomplish. I think we got a special group in this locker room, and a bunch of great leaders, guys that have been through, so many different playoff games, cup runs, and, it's joy to be around these guys, and, excited to see what we can accomplish next year. Yeah.
So I'm pumped as Cooley, by the way. It was his birthday yesterday. Happy birthday yesterday, Logan Cooley, 22 years old. Happy birthday today to my brother, by the way. My older brother is 45 today. Shout out to my brother Luke. Logan Cooley, when he says, I don't think there's a limit to what we can accomplish, I hope he has a full appreciation about what level of driving force he's going to be around this franchise's accomplishment moving forward. Logan Cooley is a determinant of the ceiling of this franchise. More so, I think, than most players. We saw a glimpse into his playoff psyche. We saw a little window into his awareness of what needs to be done when it's nut cutting time in the actual Stanley Cup playoffs. He is going to be one of those guys that determines what the limit of this franchise is. If he plays and continues to develop at the clip that we have seen so far, he will be an all-star. He'll be an Olympian. He'll be a guy that determines the overall path of Utah Mammoth hockey and of Team USA hockey to some extent in the next decade or so. No limit to what the team can accomplish. No limit to what Logan Cooley personally can accomplish if he stays healthy. It's an exciting time, really, to be kind of at the ground level, and we all got to do it together all at the same time. The bandwagon still has plenty of seats on it, but it's open. It's like, hey, come on in. And these players, man, especially the core that is now extended. I'm talking about the Schmaltz, Keller, Cooley, Gunther, these guys that for the next 6 to 8 years are going to be the backbone of Mammoth hockey. It's good for you. JJ Peterka, we expect more from him next year. And again, my hope is that the right questions are asked during the media availability with Coach Bear and with Bill Armstrong and company today on hey, who lived up to what you expected? What is the realistic goal for what you get out of Peterka and Uyghur and some of the acquisitions that you made at the end of this season, or before the end of the season, I should say? We'll have some of that sound for you on the show tomorrow, and we'll digest everything that they're saying. The Drive with Spence Checketts is coming up next. Crosstalk is brought to you here on the Sean O'Connell Show, and the beginning of the drive by our friends down at Advanced Window Products, 801-850-9100. That's how you get $2,500 off 10 windows or more. Lifetime warranty on the windows. the sales process, the installation process, the warranty process, the manufacturing process, every step of the process is handled in-house here in Salt Lake City by a company that has been owned, operated, and trusted for decades in our community. 801-850-9100 or advancedwindows.com. Spence Checketts is right here in our frigid Broadway studio. Hey.
My bad. I was standing out there waiting for you to go to break. I've been here for like 7 minutes.
Oh, that's fine.
I left you drowning.
No, here's what happened. We took a break when we were supposed to today for the first time.
Oh, that's not a skill I have. I'm not good at that.
Yeah, I'm bad at it.
But you were in here cooking with some Utah Mammoth hot takes. So I wanted to let you go.
I don't know how hot those takes are, but it sucks because the season's over. I'm already anxious for next year to begin for the Utah Mammoth because that forward step is going to be, I think, a significant one, and we'll see how it plays out next year. Also, I'm glad they're better than they were last year. I'm glad they're going to be better next year, but the Colorado Avalanche are going to mow down whatever stands in their way this year. So even if you advance at some point, you're like, all right, we're not real contenders, though.
Well, and you, as I was pulling in the building, you used a line that I love. Good is sometimes the enemy of great.
Yeah.
And we talked about this yesterday a little bit through the prism of what Dennis Lindsay decided to do with the Al Jefferson, Paul Millsap Jazz. And then what Danny Ainge decided to do with the Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell Jazz. Because those were really good teams. And you could make an argument that the Gobert-Mitchell group actually could have maybe competed for a championship, but they just had so many playoff failures. And how long will Bill Armstrong be patient if we don't see tangible steps forward? Because next year will be year 6 of this process they started, right? This was year 5. And Bill is kind of this it's like clairvoyant. He's called it like almost every year if you listen to him. It's like, yeah, this year I think we're going to compete. Okay, this year we really should be a wild card team. What's the expectation next year? And if it's not met, how long are you willing to be patient for a group that is good and maybe not great?
Well, the funny thing, I want to know what Bill's thoughts on that are.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's Ryan and Ashley.
Sure.
Going, okay, I got a taste of this. I want something good now. I want something big now. Can we make that happen? And, of course, the hockey guy, Bill Armstrong, is going to be like, well, this is probably kind of the realistic.
Yeah.
Well, you told me year 7 of the 8-year plan was that we should be at least into the second round. Maybe we got another first round exit. I need a change right now. And that's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic develops and plays out.
Yeah, I wonder, because it's interesting to consider. Ryan, of course, is an admitted basketball guy. Talks about it all the time. Like when he had an ownership stake in RSL, soccer fans like, you gonna showed up to a game, you want to make a trade? And he's like, well, his bandwidth was on basketball. And then once the hockey thing became a reality, he just had to exit stage left from soccer because he had too much on his plate. So the reason I bring it up is there's mixed messaging about how involved he is on the basketball side, because he uses language like Austin has final recommendation to me. Most owners in the NBA just hire basketball people and say, okay, go do your job. And honestly, the most successful ones absolutely do that. So I've never heard Ryan say no, Austin's running the thing or Danny's running the thing. It's always like they have final recommendation to me. And what if we're sitting there on draft night and Austin wants Darren Peterson and Danny wants AJ DeBonsa, and they look at Ryan is it his call? It sounds like it is. But
are we saying that Ryan Smith is Jerry Jones in this thing?
Absolutely. I don't. No, look.
Awesome.
No, look. He doesn't even run from it. It's the language he uses when discussing his basketball ops. The question I have is, there's no way Ryan knows.
There's just no way he's doing that with
a millionth of what Bill Armstrong and his staff knows. He can't be like, hey, I found a winger in Czechoslovakia that I want to sign next week.
There's no way that's happening in hockey.
Right,
if that's happening in basketball,
right,
it's not happening in hockey. But look, owners, they say you have the luxury when you're an owner to be like, I don't care how you get me the result, get me the result.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, sir, it's not even not even possible to get that result right now. Do it anyway.
Yeah.
That's what owners get to do.
Look, the bottom line is you own the team. You get to do whatever you want to do. I mean,
Gosh, I want a team so bad.
11-2, baby. That midday radio salary right around the corner. Maybe if we combine our net worth. Nope. Prices are really high these days.
You know what? We could buy like an AAU hockey team.
I don't think we could even do that. Prices are pretty high these days.
We could buy the Mighty Ducks.
Let's combine our resources and agree to donate the sticks next year for the right to make a decision on a trade.
Won't happen.
Well, they probably can handle the money needed for sticks. Anyway, I do wonder if the hockey success has mitigated the basketball failures for Ryan a little bit. I wonder if he feels a little bit better about his entire project because the hockey team has been able to improve leaps and bounds while we're still waiting to see what the basketball team is going to look like.
I think if it were me, that would be an absolute yes.
Yeah.
Because if all you're holding on to is like a losing anything, bad feeling.
Yeah. I will say this about Ryan. It was interesting. I went down to I think it was the second to last game of the season. It was the Denver game. And was able to spend about 20 minutes with him. And the coolest thing he said to me, that I've never heard him say this publicly, because I said to him, I'm like, look, are you having any fun? You know, because we were talking about the tanking thing and how frustrated he was with the fine and how he's talking to Adam and the Board of Governors about what they can do to kind of curtail this. And you could tell it was stressful on him because he's a basketball guy who wants to see this team get better. And I say, look, between the hockey stuff and this like, are you enjoying this? And he said, I was raised, my parents got divorced. My wife was raised in a one-bedroom apartment in Las Vegas. Like, we had nothing. This is awesome. He's like, I'm having so much fun. And I was relieved to hear that because I think, you know, like Jim Dolan, for instance, his dad, Chuck Dolan, brought cable television to the Northeast. And instead of giving his children money via inheritance, he said, what business do you want? And Jim said, I want the garden. So it was bought for him. And he just seems miserable. I don't think he enjoys any of it. All he wants to do is play kazoo for his dumb band on the road.
I was going to say, that's what he enjoys.
That's all he wants to do, build spheres everywhere and open for the Eagles because he agrees to not take money to do it. So they're like, fine, we don't have to pay an opener. You can play your dopey kazoo and your fedora on stage, you moron. Like, he's miserable. And Ryan seems like he's genuinely enjoying himself. So that's kind of a breath of fresh air.
And I think it matters to Ryan and Smith that, like, other people are enjoying this process too. He wants fandom for these teams. And maybe that's a business proposition. In some ways, it's obvious that it is. But, like, he wants people to enjoy this.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool. Anyway.
Yeah, and last thing, I was talking to and look, I know the deal. Like, he's also in this because he got $1 billion from the state. And this is, there will never be a generation of Ryan Smith's posterity that has to work ever again. Yes, this is capitalism. But I was talking to a really high-ranking official for the Smith Entertainment Group. And I said, look, what's it like to work for him? He said, it's awesome. He said, so this guy has two sons. One plays high school ball. The other plays AAU. He said, last year, I didn't miss one game for either of my children because I would say to him, like, dude, we got an AAU trip to Vegas this weekend. Like, is it cool if and he said, go. Don't miss anything that your kids are doing. Like, so look, is it propaganda? Is it just like messaging? I don't know, but people seem to like working for him.
I think the team itself has been nothing but impressed and complimentary of the process of moving from Arizona to Utah and pursuing their goals together now with this community in a new practice facility. There's a lot of really, really good things happening. Unfortunately, the season is over. We'll give you some sound. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Bill Armstrong, Coach Bear, et cetera, are going to address the media today. Spence Checketts and The Drive is next right here on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM.